soon. And why is it? Oh, there we go. All right.
Greg, I was supposed to have the podcast at my parents' house, and that's why I put the computer at my parents' house because I wanted out of my house and out of my life.
Yeah.
And now I can't even do that because we have to do it at this ungodly hour.
But you're the one who said to do it at the ungodly hour.
Because you have a date.
Yes.
Once again, your lifetime, your love life is burdening everyone. Me.
Wait a minute. Audience. Wait a minute. I know you're doing shtick, but I just want to say.
Shtick? No.
Well, you're the one who said to do this before the date. I insisted on doing it after the date because I intend to. I don't know if you know this. I intend to keep the date short. So I got stuff to do.
Folks, I told them let's do it before the date, just in case your date goes well. You know what I mean?
If it goes well, do you understand? If it goes really well, then I'm probably gonna have to call not the airline. I'm gonna have to call the stupid Indian-run website that I booked the flight on and talk to these people and then pay extra money to stay here longer in Israel. If it goes really well, if it goes moderately well, then I'm gonna leave and it's gonna be a shorter date. You understand that? You're already getting a headache from this as much as a headache as I have just thinking about it.
I try to have reasonable expectations. Okay. What I meant by a good date is, you're having such a good conversation, right? You just want to keep walking and talking. You talk all night.
As my father says, сколько можно пиздеть?
Your father doesn't remember, obviously, what it's like to,
Oh, he remembers. He kept it short and sweet. Or as my friend liked to say,
I bullshit.
I used to I had a friend. I have a friend in Jersey, and I used to Russian Jewish guy, and I used to ask him, "Hey man, do you want to go to this such and such cafe or event?" He goes, all I care about if it's good and local. Is the music good? All I care about is local. I'm like, what does local mean to you? He's like, no more than 15-minute drive. Good and local. That's what I like. Good and local. He didn't like driving. He didn't like crossing the bridge to go to the city. He didn't like, he's like, if I'm going to go to the city and cross the bridge, it's got to be something spectacular. Otherwise,
Problem is, most of the people that you're talking about, including myself, we lived in South Brooklyn. In South Brooklyn, all you get is Russian crap and Guido crap.
That's true. That's true.
If you're into that, then great. If you're not, then you got to go basically
you gotta go to the city,
to Manhattan or right across the river from Manhattan, either in Brooklyn or in Hoboken. So you have to go there anyway.
Correct. Well, luckily for me, I grew up in Bergen County, and then there's certain towns where you kind of had certain, you could find things that were pretty cool. Where you didn't have to cross the river, and I hear echo.
This is the sounds of morning in my home. But I want to clarify what I just said because again, I think I did something that you usually do. I use very esoteric terminology. And I'm sure most of the folks listening to us are not from.
It's not esoteric. It's like it's what we would call it's like not an inside joke, but it's more of like
That's what esoteric is.
Oh, okay. I thought it meant just like weird. All right.
No, esoteric means like a secret club language that it's exclusive language which is not meant for everyone, or it's not. It's just. It's like a dialect, basically.
Well, I think people know who Guidos are just from watching Jersey Shore, which was real.
What I mean. See, that's where I was. So generally, when you hear Guido, that's something like it's something derisive to say about Italian Americans, right? Because Guido is a common Italian name, and so it's like saying, "Oh, look at those," like let's say like in Japan. They call American Johnnies or something like that. Oh, look at those Johnnies over there, or like or the Americans in Vietnam. I got Charlie everywhere, Charlie. Which comes from anyway. So, but that's not in the way that I meant. Guido is a kind of culture in Brooklyn. I don't know if it's still there.
It's there. It's still there. But,
it was there in the
abundantly.
80s.
Yeah.
which I hope it really is there
It is.
because Guido, I can't imagine them going woke.
This is a tradition that's passed on from generation to
But
generation.
let me
No,
explain.
it will never die. Yeah,
Let
yeah.
me explain what I mean. Let me explain
I'm
what
just
I
letting
mean.
you know.
Is it woke resistance? We'll get to it in a second. I
Hmm.
hope it
Hmm.
is. But
Hmm.
Guido's like it's not isolated to Italian Americans. It's a
It's
type
not.
of Brooklyn persona,
Hmm.
right? It's kind of like if you think about people. I'm trying to think what is a Guido inspired by?
By the way, it's not only Brooklyn; it's all
You're not
Jersey.
gonna let me explain
I'm
what
sorry. I'm just
Guido
adding.
is.
I'm just adding. It's also Jersey. It's not just relegated
I
to.
know. I'm just saying. Let
Yeah.
me explain what it is to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like what is it inspired by? What is a Guido inspired by? He's inspired by the Boiler Room, the movie The Boiler Room. He's inspired by um, The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Definitely The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Um,
Pretty much all the mafia movies. Godfather.
yeah, Scarface, the Jersey
Yeah.
Shore,
Yeah.
right? Like that kind of person, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot more, and that transcends. It's
Hmm.
for everyone. You'll find like Jews, Puerto
Russian,
Ricans,
Russian Jewish Guidos you find
right.
also.
So earlier when I said, if you live in South Brooklyn, all you have is Guido crap and Russian
Yeah.
crap,
Yeah.
right? So when I say Russian crap, I'm talking about Russian Guidos,
Yes.
okay? but again, it's just it's a type of music, it's a type of
Yeah.
culture, it's a type of,
Yeah.
it's like I don't know how to explain it any
Yeah.
better than
Yeah.
that.
It's to give you like a visual. It's Sergio Tacchini or Tacchini, however you pronounce it.
Most of the people watching this have no
Sports.
idea what that is.
Listen, there is a designer named Sergio Tacchini, sports outfit, sports pants, and sports windbreaker. It's stuff that you see soprano guys wear. But this is like maybe the older generation. Guidos of today, they wear like very, very tight shirts with like, all kinds of like crazy whacked out designs that look like somebody puked, like with Jackson Pollock painting, kind of sort of
Yeah.
like affliction. It says affliction or whatever it says. Armani Exchange, AX, it goes like, we used to go like this, like everything is like this.
Yeah. No, that's the Guido dance and sound
No, no,
effect.
no. Well, the dance is this, but the design is this.
Yeah. In the 80s, Guidos, they were driving IROC Z's.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
They were driving RXZs. They were wearing, the tank tops. We call them white beater shirts. They were wearing a lot of jewelry, especially on their over the neck and the arms. They were listening to in Brooklyn. They used to listen to what's called freestyle music,
Okay, hold on.
which actually is very, very good, by the way.
Stop right there. So that was in the 80s.
Correct.
And in the early
90s. Yeah.
Yeah. But after that, and if that is the kind of music that was still being played, right?
Mhm.
Then I would have been okay with going to Guido venues and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
But they switched to trance.
Mm,
I hate
bad,
trance.
bad trance. There's good trance and there's bad.
Okay,
trance.
so that so in my crew, in my circles, we called good trance progressive house.
Progressive house. Yeah, correct.
Okay, so it was very tribal with the kind of music we all listen to.
Yeah.
If you're a progressive house head,
Yeah.
then you don't like trance kids because they're all juiced out. They have blowout haircuts. You know?
Yeah.
This is like we're going back.
My cousin was into the whole Guido thing for maybe a couple of years before he became religious. A little bit. But I don't think he recognized it as such. I think he just thought it was just like the way guys in Brooklyn are supposed to be. So he just kind of followed that.
So as it turns out,
motif.
You had Chinese Guidos, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
That we considered Guidos, and we had Italian guys who were listening to progressive house, and we all anybody who was listening to progressive house feels that we're much more intelligent and sophisticated, right? And we'd all hang out together, and it would be the same. It would be the same medley of people from different ethnic groups. You know what I mean?
Yes. There was like overlap. Yeah.
Right, and it got the name Guido. I don't even know how that happened.
Yeah,
probably.
I don't know. The only thing I can think of is the character Guido Sarducci.
Father
Guido Sarducci. That's a whole other character.
I'm just curious why Guido, not Luigi? Why not,
I
why
mean,
not
I
Gianni?
mean, in my day, when I went, when I lived in Brooklyn, I actually went to public school PS216, and that was on Avenue X, with a lot of Italian kids, and they used the term Guinea.
No, Guinea.
Actually,
That's different. That's specifically.
Italians.
That's a derogatory term against Italians.
Yeah, but they
Specifically.
interchanged it. It was like Guido, Guinea, Guido. It was interchangeable.
No, no.
At that.
So when you wanted to be a dick to somebody Italian, and
Yeah,
you wanted to use some kind of
yeah,
racist term of them, you said
yeah,
Guinea.
yeah,
But Guido I've never in my entire, and I grew up, I was born and raised in Brooklyn.
yeah.
Never in my entire
And,
life did I ever hear somebody use the term Guido
yeah.
as an insulting thing. It was just
By the way,
kind of
you know
weird.
what?
Yeah.
You know why they use Guinea? Because Guinea is to imply, because you have the country Papua New Guinea or Guinea, and you have black people there. So it's to imply that Italians. I mean, you're talking about like most of the immigrants from in America, Italian immigrants are from southern, from Calabria, from Sicily. So they were considered like, it was like there was a lot of racism in Italy. They considered them blacks,
Yeah,
so
but
they call them Guinea.
can I tell where did you hear this?
I didn't know. First of all, it was explained to me about Italian. I actually asked Italian American, but it's also there's a lot of there's a lot of articles written on this.
Okay,
Uh,
so I find that difficult to believe
why?
because it makes no sense. Because if you're gonna have some kind of association between Italians and black for whatever bad reason, right? So you're gonna say the Moors.
Listen, dude.
It doesn't make any sense because Papua New Guinea is
I know, or no.
on
Well,
the other side of the world.
there's the country of Guinea, which is in Africa. Interestingly enough, I'll tell you this. Um, we spoke about this before. The 1990 World Cup. There was a player on the Italian team. He must have been like 5'6", 5'7". He was a striker. He was a forward, a guy that scores all the goals. And when he was chosen for the team, like he was chosen because he was adept at scoring goals. A lot of people in Italy were very unhappy. Why? Because the guy himself is from Sicily, and people, they wanted, at worst, guys who are like from Rome. That's a southern, like literally, they're like us. You chose a Sicilian that he plays for Palermo. He doesn't play for Juventus or Milan or any of these northern Italian clubs.
Yeah.
And they called the guy negro. They called him black. And they would throw, literally at games, at league games, they throw like bananas at the guy, banana peels. That's what they do in Spain to black guys.
That's what the Argentinians. That's how Argentinians
yeah,
see Brazilians too.
And guess what? This guy ended up scoring 6 goals in the tournament, and they finished in third place. Granted, they made the semifinal, and he has been a national hero ever since. Salvatore Schillaci. And if you look at the guy, you're like, okay, he's just an Italian. He has a little bit of a more kind of Mediterranean complexion, but he's not black. But they consider Sicilians black. To them, they're blacks.
No, because Italy is split up into northern Italy and southern Italy, and northern Italians hate southern Italians.
Yeah, they're
racist against them. Okay, because they're not as white or whatever.
Yeah, that's literally what it is, and not as white, and not as rich, and not as rich, and not as not as whatever, sophisticated, not as up there and uppity and whatever.
Yeah,
it still prevails to this day. That's why when Maradona, speaking of the 90s and 80s, Maradona went to play for Naples. Out of all the teams he could have chosen, he chose Naples, and all of a sudden, Naples started beating. They started beating all these northern Italian teams, and they ultimately won the championship. This was back in the 80s, and everybody's like, "Oh my God! Like this is like crazy!" All of a sudden, there's like a southern Italian team. Like a town that's like known for mafia. Speaking of the Sopranos,
Napoli,
and now all of a sudden, they're winning championships, and it was something he did it for them. He was like, listen, he wasn't a fan of. He knew about all the racism, and also he had background in it. His family background was partially from Italy, I believe his father.
Well,
and yeah,
that's what we call amore.
Yes, it's amore
in old Napoli.
Unfortunately, he was a socialist, Maradona. He had a tattoo of Castro on his arm. he said something. Even though he came to Israel a few times and they played, Argentina played exhibition games against Israel. He actually, was very much loved here in the 80s and 90s. But at the same time, he came out later in his life. The whole Free Palestine thing and the whole Castro thing. And
seriously, I had no idea.
he did, yeah, he did.
I'm glad. I never got on the Maradona.
Yeah.
Whatever they call it.
Maradona train, yeah.
But
yeah.
not for those reasons. I just whatever, you know what I mean. And
Yeah,
now I'm glad I didn't.
Well, you know what? Upon further examination, I kind of like came to the conclusion that he obviously, I don't think he hated Jews. I just think that he was one of these people. It's like the typical story of like a person who comes from the slums and he just has a soft spot for anybody who he considers to be downtrodden and all the rest of it and poor.
I want to tell you something. You just touched on something which kind of I don't give a damn who hates Jews, who likes Jews. I don't give a damn at all. That's for God. Mm-hmm. That's God's business. It's not my business. Mm-hmm. Because I've been so disappointed. Like I guess it used to matter to me, when I was younger. Yeah. But I got so disappointed because it's almost like at every point, like there's some guy that like whatever you really like, and then you hear him say something about the Jews, and you get all disappointed, right? Yeah. And that happened like a million times.
Yeah. Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. Now, like if I just saw this, I saw a clip this morning with Jim Brewer.
Oh, he said a hint. He said some kind of a hinting at something. Yeah, I saw that.
He's like, why are all the agents from
a certain thing? Yeah. But but he said that on the Roseanne show.
That's what I'm saying. It seems like they go on Roseanne and then they betray the Jews right
after. Well,
you
know what's interesting, because I think Roseanne, I tried to put myself in Roseanne's shoes at that particular moment, and I think knowing her, she probably accepted what he said because she knows, meaning meaning not that he knows he's referring to, but she knows who he's referring to, which is Avraham, even though she didn't bother to.
Does she understand that they don't that they make no distinction between Avraham?
She does understand Jews? That. She does understand that. I just think at that particular nanosecond, she just made a choice not, she wasn't going to end the podcast because.
So let me answer your question, Jim Brewer. All right. Yeah. How come everybody in the mafia is Italian? How come all the West Side boys are Irish? Mm-hmm. How come everybody in the Chinese triad is Chinese? How come there's a big conspiracy? Because Hollywood is a criminal organization, okay? And every type of ethnicity or background that exists in the world unfortunately has its criminal elements. Okay, mm-hmm. And the lowest shit, unfortunately, from the Jewish nation ends up in Hollywood. Okay, that's where our criminal element ends up. Okay, yeah. So you're upset that you're a criminal for being part of that. Yeah, you're upset that the criminal organization that you worked for and became famous for and became rich, whatever your success, that the leadership of that criminal organization was Jewish. They started it.
You know how we know what you're saying?
One way or the other. But you're working for a criminal organization which is started by criminal Jews.
You know how I know what you're saying?
Mafia if you don't like Jews.
You know how I know what you're saying is true? Because it's dafka true, because Hollywood was founded by specifically guys from, mostly, not all of them, but a lot of guys were from Odessa, Ukraine.
They don't.
And what is
at home that you have to?
And I will. I'm about to.
Yeah,
good. My next sentence was going to be. And what is Odessa, Ukraine, known for? Mafia, Jewish mafia businessman. His name was Misha. The main one was Misha Yaponchik. They even made a movie about him.
Right.
Dude, I mean, like, and then some of these guys came to Brooklyn and Brighton Beach, and they continued their activities in America, unfortunately.
Jim, maybe you like Japanese people better. Go work for the Yakuza. All right? I don't know what do you complain? You and Dave, go fuck yourselves, both of you.
Ay. I gotta say though, I really liked Jim's act about COVID. It's kind of funny. 6 foot safe, 5 foot danger. That was pretty funny. And the parrots.
It's very funny. Oh, it's wonderful, Greg. Whatever. You know what I mean? I don't care anymore. Look, my brother.
Ah.
Some people told me that that my brother was just trying to ingratiate himself. Like this is I heard.
To who? To Christians?
To non-Jews or some to non-Jews,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
And that's why I want to make something clear about my brother. He did it not to ingratiate himself with anyone. He did not give a shit about that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He could not give a shit who liked him, who didn't. He literally did it because it was the right thing to do, and he was serving God. Okay? If God, that's how he knew that the majority of people,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not the majority, but a very, very high percentage of the people that he was trying to help hated Jews.
Yeah.
He did it anyway, not because he gives a shit about what they think, but because it's just the right thing to do. Because what does that mean, the right thing to do? It means God wants people to try to preserve human life.
Yeah.
Okay? Nowhere in the Torah does it say preserve the life only of people who like Jews. It doesn't say that anywhere. Okay? So we know, regardless of whether or not we're liked, we know that people are important to God. You gotta save human life if you can, if it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I offer my theory on what's going on here with this whole thing of I've been thinking about this a lot. We've been talking about it a lot, but I've been trying to really get to the heart of the matter. I feel like, and what is it that I've been thinking about? It seems like it'll be like it almost seems like the same person A or person X who comes out and gives the indication that he doesn't like Jews, right? Also is a person who liked your brother. So I'm thinking to myself, how can we, or how did this person reconcile that? Maybe the person themselves doesn't reconcile that, but how can we reconcile it? How can I reconcile it for myself?
Why should we reconcile it?
No, or not reconcile. Let me rephrase this. I feel like Hashem is doing something here. God is doing something here. And again, this is just my theory. It's on what I think is God is doing, not what people are doing. And you are free to, either poke holes at it or throw it in the garbage completely. I feel like God is trying to do this thing where he wants to literally make a distinction between the Jews that we were just talking about, the ones who run Hollywood, the ones who do this and who do that, versus people who look like you and me and your brother and other people like that. Let's say the ones who are in fact making a Kiddush Hashem and making, sanctifying God's name and helping people. And it's almost as if I feel like he's going to force some of the non-Jewish people to in fact make a distinction on their own. Meaning, I'll tell you why I think this, because man, and it's interesting. We're gonna ask, and I'm gonna be daring enough to mention this to our guest who's coming on very, very shortly. There are black people. To me, there's different kinds of black people, right? And as I'm sure there are to Mordechai. To me, there's different kinds of white people. There's different kinds of Jewish people. I remember once. What is that noise? I remember once watching. I don't remember what movie it was. It was an old movie. I think I think it was like Sidney Poitier. He was in one of these movies. He was in the courthouse or something, courtroom. He's a lawyer, and he's like talking to the. I remember if it was that movie or another movie where there's a white Southern guy who's basically saying something to the effect of, "Oh, he's not the same type of black man as the other one," right? And then I think it was Poitier or maybe it was Denzel Washington who goes, "Oh, he's that kind of black guy, not this kind of black guy." And then the white guy goes, "Yeah, you got it, dude." Can't hear you. Oh, wonderful. Oh, speaking of which, boom, right on cue.
I couldn't even hear you because
Right on cue. Oh,
all right, I heard something about
okay.
48
So I'm gonna add.
in a courtroom.
Mordechai. You came in like. Can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You literally came in, and I'll introduce you to the folks at home. But you came in literally like almost as if by Hashem's command. Because what was I talking about just now? I was talking about how not all people in a particular demographic group are the same, right? And I was saying, we were saying how like there's good Jews, there's bad Jews, there's bad African Americans, there's good African Americans, there's bad Chinese, there's good Chinese. And I was mentioning, I don't remember what the movie was. Maybe you could remember. It was either Sidney Poitier or Denzel Washington, where they were talking. I think it was in a courthouse, and they were talking to some like a cop or something like that, or like this like Southern guy, and the guy was testifying, and he was saying how like you know he basically made a distinction between the black guy that he saw over here versus the black guy that he saw over there, and then I guess it was Washington or Sidney Poitier goes, oh yeah, because he's a good black, and that guy is like a ghetto black, and then the white guy goes, yeah, like yes, so
Mordechai, I apologize
yeah.
for. First, I want to say hi. Second of all, I apologize for
Mhm.
the blender noise. Okay, which is always on cue. Okay, in my home, and but I just want to make a point because me and Greg we're just having this discussion for a second. I just wanted to say that I don't know if that's God's intention. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what I'm trying to say is it should not be our concern whatsoever. Because you're always going to be disappointed, I promise you. That's God's business. What he gets people to understand, like to finally start making distinctions that there's different, that every kind of background that you look at, right? Every ethnicity, every cultural background, there's it's not monolithic. There's all different kinds of people with all different kinds of agendas, right? So
Yep.
I no longer give a shit who understands that, who doesn't. There's something about that, like trying to get people to understand the difference between Jews and Erev and anything of that nature. It feels weak to me. It feels like to be concerned with that is weak. Is just weak, because the more you want it, the less they'll recognize it. There's something about those people that just kind of like when they see Jews stressing out over that, they love it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I don't give a shit. I'm at the point where I hope the people who hate us continue hating us, because I know what the result is going to be for them. I want them to be damned. I don't give a damn anymore. I'm sick of walking around worrying how does somebody feel about me. I'm just going to go and do what I know that God wants me to do. Whatever the result is, gesundheit, as we like to say.
So with that said, Mordechai, our friend Mordechai, is here, and if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Good to have you, by the way.
Huh?
Welcome, sir.
I said welcome. Good to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I guess first day of school. My name is Mordechai Yosef Ben Avraham, and I live in Jerusalem. And a few years ago, I became what they call a rabbi. Which is adding on to the stress of my life, but enjoying life nevertheless.
So, where are you from? And as I understand that, I'm going to tell the folks at home that Mordechai didn't always dress like this. He didn't always have that cap on his head or that hat or whatever kippah. It's been a journey. It's been a story, physically, spiritually. So, if you want to tell us about it, you can give the short version, the long version, whatever you want.
No, we don't. Nobody wants to do the long. You guys want to do the long version. I'll say like this. So I was born in Springfield, Ohio, which is known for being one of the largest producers of red roses in the United States. And
Yeah,
at the
man.
time, my dad was going to a liberal arts college in a place called Wilberforce. It was a University of Wilberforce, something like this. And him and my mom was going to school at Loyola Marymount, whatever. Anyway, they meet at a college conference. They met in the lobby. The story is my dad knew instantly he was going to marry my mom. He goes to his roommate and says, I just met the woman I'm going to marry. And so they couldn't afford long distance phone calls because at this time, long distance was very expensive, not like we have today. And so they wrote letters, and eventually my mom moved to Ohio from California and married my father. And a couple years later, I was born. And so I grew up the first 2 years of my life in Springfield, Ohio, and then we moved to California, Los Angeles, and we lived in a area called Ladera Heights. It's an area in Los Angeles, and then eventually we moved to the San Fernando Valley, and we lived in the area which is like some people refer to as Calabasas. It could be West Hills, but it's in that area. Went to Calabasas High School, left there, was working for my dad in the insurance business, the family company. My dad has his own insurance agency, and so I worked for him and was going to school part-time at UCLA. And I started the internet company when I was in college. Kind of like got out working for my dad and going to school part time. My mom was actually a professor at UCLA at the time, and started the internet company. And like most internet companies, it went up, it went down, and I just continued on in business and got involved in the entertainment business. I started throwing parties in Los Angeles when I was in high school. I played football. I was, pretty good athlete, in sports. But I was popular. I knew a lot of people at different schools. So I would always throw parties, this was this, but whatever. And we started to charge people. We wanted to make money from it, And so we started charging people. And I met this guy named Keith Durr. Was a random guy who just got out of jail for selling marijuana. It was like a whole story. Like I didn't know a person. He's like the first guy that I knew that was like a real drug dealer. Actually, I went to high school with Jesse Hollywood. I don't know if you know who that is. They did a whole movie about his life, whatever. Anyway, so I met this guy, Keith Durr, and he's the first person to teach me about marketing. He said, man, you got all these friends, all these people who know this. You should throw concerts. And I'm like, what do you mean concerts? He says, yeah, like you get like a artist and you pay them money, and then they'll come, and then you already have an audience, and then they bring their audience, and you could charge even more money. And I was like, this is a genius idea, whatever. And so a friend of mine lived across the street from Mac 10. The rapper Mac 10? I don't know if you heard of him. Yeah. The rapper Mac 10 was taking so Mac 10 was his neighbor. And so exactly around this time I have this conversation, my dad gives me money to buy another car and to give my brother my old car. And so the money that my dad gave me to buy a new car, I used that money to go and book Mac 10 as an artist. And that was my first concert. And we broke even. I didn't make any money, but we broke even. But it was the first rap concert, almost ever in the Valley, right? It was the first concert ever in the Valley. Long story short, I made friends with the radio stations because I had to buy advertisements. So I ended up doing a concert with the radio station later on. And then the booking agents started saying, who's this guy throwing all these events, in the Valley, which were rap events, right? Because rap was predominantly, not African-American, environment that I was in. And so it turned into this thing where all the different artists that would come in town, I worked out a deal with the agencies and even the radio stations where I would pay them a nominal fee. They'll come do a few songs. I pay them some money and we promote it. And then that's how I, in essence, started to get into the entertainment business.
Wow, so you kind of became almost like I don't even know whom to compare you to. Almost like a mini Barry Gordy of Los Angeles suburbs or something like that, like impresario of that kind of thing.
Yeah,
hey,
before
we get too far, let me ask you a question. Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah, please.
What is the proximity of that to Dayton, Ohio? I'm just curious.
It's not that far. It's relatively pretty close. I don't know the exact distance, but I think my dad actually I think they actually may have even lived in Dayton, Ohio for a little bit. I don't know. There's a story about my family Dayton. I don't know the exact story, but I heard Dayton many of times. But it's very close.
I've spoken to a lot of people from Dayton, Ohio. Everybody has a UFO story, so we'll get into that some other time. Don't worry about it. All right, please continue.
Fair enough.
Did your parents, by the way?
Too, I think Ohio has the most astronauts.
Really?
Than any other state in America.
That produced the most astronauts.
That produced the most astronauts, and then also you have the Wright brothers too, right? The planes and the whole thing. So it's a lot of like elevation, aviation, type of stuff there. Yeah.
Did your parents know? Because I know that, I mean, what's his name? Dave Chappelle is from, I think he lives in Dayton, or he's from Dayton, and his parents also are professors, or his mom's a professor. Your parents never like came across with him or his parents?
No. But you know who they did know? John Legend was also born, I think, in Springfield, Ohio.
Interesting.
Yeah, the singer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mordechai, when this whole thing is happening in the Valley, what era are we talking about? Is this the 90s, after 2000? When was this?
This is around like 2000. This is like like the group like so when I went to high school at Calabasas, you had Incubus. I don't know if you remember the group Incubus.
Of course,
I remember.
Okay, so Incubus went to high school. I grew up going to backyard chills with Incubus, Brandon Boyd, and all those guys playing. That's how I grew up in high school. They were older. They were like seniors when I was like a sophomore, but I grew up with them. Also, Hoobastank. I don't know if you know they are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park. Rob Borden, who's a drummer in Lincoln Park, went to Calabasas with me. We, I haven't seen him in years, but it was cool. So it was a lot of talented people. And the thing that's cool about that era is that the way that the whole Lincoln Park sound came with this half DJ, have rock and roll thing happen.
Like Fred Durst and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Is that was it Limp Bizkit? What are they called?
Limp Bizkit, that sound.
Yeah, that sound. So in the Valley, most of the kids who lived in the Valley where we grew up at, those kids went to private schools. So the public schools that were there were relatively like underpopulated. So they used to bus in kids from Los Angeles, from the inner city, out to the Valley to like offset the population, or to like, because schools get paid like per kid. That's why attendance is so important, because they get paid. And so what happened was with the football players, after the games, some of the football players would stay out in the Valley. Some football players from the inner city, African-American, that were there. And so the parties in the Valley, half of the parties would be like rap, hip hop, like DJ stuff. And then the other half of the party would people be jamming on guitars.
Interesting.
And so over time, that all came together. And then that's where that kind of like sound, at least from the West Coast, became a really popular type of thing.
It's really interesting because the stuff you're talking about. I mean, like Frank always mentions it, how he went to yeshiva in Israel at that time, and then he came back in the year 2000 or 2001, and all of a sudden this really crappy music is popular.
Hey, I wasn't gonna say nothing. All right, I was gonna sit here and keep my mouth.
Well, I was gonna focus. I was gonna focus more on the Britney Spears thing and more on the. Christina Aguilera and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and all the rest of the stuff.
It was around that time, exactly.
Yeah. And then reality shows and or fake how reality shows became.
That was all happening at that moment.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this. I never really gave Linkin Park or Hoobastank or any of that crap a chance. And because I want to be fair, because the only thing I ever heard from them is what was played on the radio, like the popular hits. And also, there were girls that I found very annoying who were really big fans of all that stuff. So I had that negative association from the get-go. So I'm just trying to be fair. All right.
Yeah.
Please continue.
For me, it was more like sorry, go on.
No. I was going to say, if it makes you feel better, I remember being in an office and someone calling me and asked me if I wanted to book this new rapper, this white rapper named Eminem. And I just heard the song. My name is what? I was like, absolutely not. And he turned out later, to be the biggest thing ever.
I went to see.
I don't understand. He has the weeniest voice I ever heard how
It's
for a
the
rapper.
anger. It's the anger.
No, it's not the
It's
anger.
the.
Forget the
I'm
anger.
telling you.
No, it's literally the sound of his voice.
Yeah, yeah.
It's too whiny sound. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
No, you're asking how did he appeal to people? I'm telling you, it's
I
the
didn't say that.
angst.
I said
Oh,
his voice was very, very annoying.
oh,
It's
oh.
hard to
It's
hear.
hard to
Like,
make out what he's saying.
right, like when you want to hear somebody with like some kind of deep voice, or
Yeah.
the voice is important,
Like
like the way it
like
comes from.
Biggie.
He's no, I actually don't like Biggie. I don't like him at all.
I don't
All
know. I
right,
used to like him. I liked him.
like
But
I like Buckshot Shorty. Well, that's what I was
oh my
listening
god.
to. All right, so because I'm from Brooklyn, whatever. So there's a certain, like, Method Man has a good voice for rap. You know what I mean? You have to have a certain, like,
Like
Eminem
a
just
husky
sound like.
voice. Yeah.
Please
Well,
continue. Please continue.
Eminem appealed. Listen, I went to an Eminem concert. My friend dragged me to an Eminem concert, and when Eminem first came out with this, My Name Is, all that stuff. It was in New York in a Hammerstein ballroom, and there's an opening act, and so the opening act, or the two opening acts, went on for like 2 hours or 2.5 or 3 hours. We stood there. There's no seating. We stood and stood and stood and stood, and then finally he comes on, and he's just doing his thing, and it's unintelligible completely. And I think he did like 3 songs, and there was actually a mosh pit, which you only see in like rock concerts. And then actually my friend got blood on his shoe, and that was it. And that was the concert. And I was just like, this is one of the most pointless things I've ever attended. I realized then and there, like, it almost seems like there was just this whole group of kids, whether they be white or black, who had a certain, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like kids who grew up kind of where you grew up, Mordechai, or like in the suburbs where I lived in northern in Bergen County, New Jersey, where they had a certain angst about living where they lived, if that makes any sense. And I
They're
feel like
obsessed
Eminem
with it.
just,
They're obsessed with it.
yeah, the Eminem appealed to them, like the angst of living in, I don't know, suburbia, and I don't know,
Well,
being
the
bored
thing is
and
also one of the things also with Eminem that like made him, number one, he had a cosign by everybody who was anybody at that time, like an industry
sure,
cosign.
Dr. Dre
But the
and all
thing
those
that
things.
made Eminem interesting, I think, to just people in rap in general, is that one, he really embraced rural white America's story. Like we
Yeah,
never
yeah,
really heard songs about kids living in trailer parks and having
yeah,
really a single parent home and an
sure,
abusive mom, and so he really brought like this whole context of vulnerability
yeah,
into rap, where everybody else was all about persona,
yeah,
how
right,
gangster you were, how hard you were,
yeah,
how insensitive you were. But Eminem
yeah,
really like shaped that new era of rap, and you see it, I mean, you've seen it, over decades now. But Eminem really, I think that's probably his biggest contribution, was really articulating the struggle of young white kids, and truthfully, when you really think about it, Eminem, in essence, removed racism from America. Like that whole generation of we've not even heard really. I mean, recently you have ultra right neo-Nazi type kids, but in most white kids in America are nowhere close to being racist. They love hip hop, they love sports, they love black culture, they feel an affinity with it. And I think Eminem, coming out of the era of rock and roll, right? And like you're saying, mosh pits and the Iron Maidens and that world, right? Coming out
yeah.
of that reality, I think Eminem really has done more for racial equality and removing racism between African Americans and white than any social justice initiative.
It could be, but as we've seen recently, and maybe you can confirm or deny, maybe from your time, and you got into Hollywood, you got into the entertainment field. Frank and I always talk about, like, we literally feel that at this point these people are, and this has been spoken about a lot on just by people who have like radio shows and podcasts, non-Jewish people, that these people are part of some weird, like I don't know, spiritualist Gnostic, uh, maybe cult or group, and whatever they've been doing for the last at least 5 to 10 years has just been some sort of ongoing dark religious ritual, and woke is part of it, and everything we see on in culture is part of it, all the way up until today with all this 70 genders and 70 identities, and this spirit and that spirit. I feel like it's all one thing that they pretty much have been perpetuating. So I don't know, maybe
Not only
yeah.
that, but Mordechai, I'm going to push back a little bit on on Eminem's effect, because right now America, like, look, can I ask you a question? How old are you? What, like, I'm not good at math. Like, how, like, what's
45.
You're
Oh
45.
wow,
Okay.
thought you were younger than me.
So you remember? I don't know about you, but in the 80s, the relationship between white and black people seemed much, much better than it did. Just from my personal experiences as a kid, from the movies that you saw, from the shows, it wasn't hateful. You understand? Like, as you got into the 90s and on, it got much, much worse. I don't see Eminem doing anything except trying to make everybody kind of get on this. I think he was an important figure in leading to what do they call it right now? Where they blame everything on toxic white masculinity. You know what I mean? Like, he played a huge role in that, in turning everybody, like, anybody who does anything that looks like American exceptionalism, or anything that's in favor of traditional Western civilization, to be anti that, including white kids. So basically what he did was he was good at taking white kids and making them anti-white. That's what he did. You understand? So in my view, all right. So, and also he had a really weenie voice. All right. I think that's what bothers me most of all. Okay. He didn't have a man's voice. There's plenty. If you want to do the white trailer park, story, you want to tell that the plight of poor white people in America, you can get a guy with a manly kind of voice. They got somebody who looked like a perpetual 14-year-old whiny asshole. Okay, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, and he always bugged me. I remember when I came back from Israel. I went in 1999. I came back in 2000, and the whole world and America was completely different. Like, it had drastically gotten worse in terms of, like, movies and music. Like, it happened almost overnight.
It's almost like it was scheduled. It would seem like it was like scheduled.
Yeah.
It's like the minute 2000 hits, you got all right. Let's just like.
It's like America and the world really dropped like 50 IQ points in over a year and a half. Like, I remember when I got back to America, people took me to see Dude, Where's My Car, or something like that, or American Pie. That's for retards. I apologize for using for using that language. You know what I mean? I apologize, but that's what I remember. The scene in Dude, Where's My Car. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, where they were at their girlfriend's house and they were struggling over a garbage bag, and then the garbage bag rips, and that's the slow motion scene where this, like, greasy slicks of oil that were contained in the garbage bag, in slow motion, they fall on their girlfriend's couch, and that was the big dramatic moment.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my friend, we just walked out of the movie theater. There's only two movies I ever walked out of the movie theater. It was Dude, Where's My Car and Moulin Rouge, just because that was just too psycho for a different reason. My point is that it just got really, really bad, like really, really fast. So,
well, speaking of which, I mean, like I mentioned before, and I wanted to ask you, Mordechai. I mentioned, reality shows or fake reality shows. You were involved in producing something, or trying to release something. I guess it was on MTV. The Jerkin. I guess it's a movement or the show about it. You want to talk about that a little bit? And
Yeah.
How did it even get started?
So I think it was like, it's a lot of backstory how I got to this point. But long story short, I got very interested in curriculum and, like, education curriculum. At the time, my mom was a professor at UCLA, and so she got me kind of like in a program where myself as an entrepreneur was able to work with master's students that were getting their master's degree in education. And so what I was doing was I was in the inner city teaching young kids about entrepreneurship. And it was like when social media was starting to happen and this whole thing. So the whole idea was being able to take your ideas and be able to learn how to articulate them to third parties, right? And so that was that thing. So when I was on high school campuses, at the same time, they had this thing in LA called gang injunctions, right? Which means is like if you're in a gang if you're in a neighborhood that has gangs and you look like you're a gang member, even if you're not, the police can come and pick you up and take you in. So what it created was like this fashion culture in the inner city where a lot of the kids now were dressing like skaters, right? They were dressing like punk rockers. They were mohawks and skinny jeans.
I was wondered about that. I was very confused because me and Frank got used to like, the whole baggy thing in Brooklyn, the whole like just
I took that down. I took it down. Yeah.
Certain style. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm serious. It was really strategic.
No,
and so the kids were dressing opposite that. And then at the same time this is going on, the kids were also, they had this new software called Fruity Loops. I don't know if you remember, it was a program.
I was using it when I was producing dance music back at that time.
So for kids it was pretty simplistic to use, even if they didn't have a big technical background.
Sure.
And so the kids, they had these sidekicks. So they were making this music, really cool. And it wasn't on the radio, whatever, but they were making this music and they were sharing it in these like networks that kids were building on these sidekicks, right? And this is like when broadband technology is getting in the inner city, the whole thing. Sure. So I'm just seeing this whole thing happen at the same time. And so I was like, hey, instead of doing a curriculum, why don't I just do a documentary about what these kids are already doing, because it's already entrepreneurial, right?
Yeah.
And on this quest, I ran into this group called the New Boys. And the New Boys had this song called "You're a Jerk." You're a jerk, you're a jerk, whatever. And so that song, it was just randomly. They added me on MySpace, right?
That's so
and
funny.
So I meet them, and soon as I meet them, I'm like, hey, I'm doing this whole documentary around like entrepreneurship and kids and technology, and their parents loved it, and so they signed an agreement with me, their parents and them, because they were underage. And a week later, after I signed this agreement with them, they get a call from Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers wants to take that single and see if they can make something happen with it. So as they're meeting with Warner Brothers, at the time it was Todd Moskowitz, who was who later became the CEO of Warner Brothers, and he actually did their big acquisition with EMI. But at the time he was over. He was the CEO of one of the sub labels. I don't know which one. It was the one with Gucci Mane was on it. I can't think of the name of it. But anyways, so he did that. So I met with Todd because I had a contract with the New Boys. He's like, who's this guy? They said, yeah, we have this contract. Because they asked him, you have contracts for anybody? I was like, yeah, we have this one thing. This guy's doing a documentary, blah, blah, blah. And so I meet with Todd Moskowitz, and then I start showing them this whole picture of not just the New Boys, but all of these groups that are like, have these followings of like hundreds of thousands, millions of views. This is like 2008, 2009. So you can imagine what a million views meant then, right? And the kids were doing it all organically. And so Todd Moskowitz eventually hired me to come on to Warner Brothers, and I was kind of like my division, and I was the VP of it. And so we brought the New Boys. The New Boys had 2 platinum albums. We sold a bunch of merch, and so the documentary, I was going to do it with MTV, and you're going to appreciate this. So MTV, they came in. It was a guy who was a producer named Donovan Leach. His dad was like a big musician, by the way. And so Donovan Leach, he was a producer there. He got connected to me because he saw like the clips and stuff that we're doing. The New Boys are getting big. The song's getting big on the radio. And so we meet. And so we did a pilot. And so we did a pilot. And after we did the pilot, we brought it to Liz Gately. Liz Gately was the vice president there, I guess, of programming, whatever, at the time. And this is what she said. She said, wow, this is really, really this is one of the best pilots we've ever seen at MTV, but it's not MTV quality. And I was like, and I was just like shocked. Like, I mean, at first when she was saying, I was like, yes, I'm about to get paid, like I was excited. And next thing you know, she says, this is MTV quality. Why? She said, because kids doing real things, like trying to change their life and doing this and dealing with their social conditions, that's not our customer. Our customer, because she also produced a movie, the show The Hills. And so she was like, our customer is someone who wants to come home. They don't want to think. They want to, basically veg out, have their beer, not think about life. And that's the type of program we're looking for.
And so what
It's
you're
really like
describing is like it's the best case scenario of what their of what their intentions are and what they were putting out. That's the best case scenario. The worst case is they're trying to program people to deliberately program them to be stupid, which is kind of
but
what we see today.
indirectly it is that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Indirectly it
sure.
is you're glorifying mindlessness and whatever. So
Yeah,
anyway, so
yeah,
MTV dropped it,
Directly.
and
It's
yeah,
directly.
yeah.
so, so,
Wait,
so
wait,
MTV
hold on.
dropped it, and then
Mordechai, I'm a little bit like, I got ADD. I'm scared that I wanted to ask you this question because you're from the West
please.
Coast, and I was when I was a kid, like junior high school or like early teens, I really I enjoyed some rap groups. Right, one of my favorite was the Far Side. I don't know if you recall. You
Passing
right?
Me
Like,
By.
I'm sorry.
Passing Me By was their big
Pass
song.
me, but yeah, the Bizarre Ride to the Far Side. The whole album was unbelievable. It was really, really good. And even though I didn't agree with their politics, and they were like, they had this one track, Clinton's on his way, Clinton's on his way, because they thought it was a big deal that Clinton was on his way. The guy's a demon, but whatever. So they were, but they were, uh, artistically sophisticated. Like the way they sampled, the way they were like, seriously, they were geniuses at what they were doing. Very, very, very unique. And it would be interesting if rap took that direction, right? Because it was cerebral, really. Like if you were listening to it, was, by the way, hilarious too. Like they had like a really highly developed sense of humor, and they understood music really well. They obviously understood. They were sampling jazz and all that. It was pretty cool. It was pretty
Kind of
cool.
like Tribe Called Quest was doing something similar to that. Well, you're not a fan.
I see why you're saying that, but it was not so much. They were different, but they were much funnier. The Far Side, I think they were more creative. But I noticed that rap took a completely different direction. I felt like that was intentional. Like, it went straight to like what you said, like low level, I'm on a boat. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? My bitch, Biggie. I think people are gonna get mad at me, rap people who like rap, but I think Biggie ruined it. He was like that line that showed that everything went into a bad direction where, I'm a gangster, I'm mistreating women, and kind of glorifying that whole thing. I call it Black Guidos. That's what I call it. You know what I mean? Like that's it just became this like shallow kind of thing. And I was like, I remember when I was a fan, I was devastated that it went in that direction. And everybody loved it. All my friends loved it. Everybody got into it. And I was just like,
Well, they loved it because they loved it because we grew up with
Russian
Russian Guidos or Russian guys in Brooklyn who love that kind of stuff, and it spoke to them.
Anyway,
yeah.
I don't even know.
Mordechai. I just want to tell you, Mordechai. Me and Frank, we got called. I don't know about you, Frank. I got called a hater by my Russian, Jewish friends in New York so many times about certain, like when I would comment on music or things that were coming out, and everybody liked something. I was like the only one, and me and like another guy were the only two who didn't like it. And everybody's like, "Why are you hating? Why are you hating?" I'm just like, I'm not hating. I'm just stating my preference or not preference for what you guys are following. And you mentioned like girls. I mean, it actually also hurt a little bit hurt me with dating because girls like this kind of music and this kind of sound, and they're constantly dancing to this and grooving to that, and I'm just not into it.
I remember starting to doubt people's
intelligence.
based on the kind of music that they were listening to. It caused
I still do.
problems. I mean, people.
Yeah,
I just remember growing up. I don't know.
big
so
time.
My question to you, Mordechai, is: do you think it was a conscious decision to make things drastically stupider, like to get us to the point where we are now? You know what I mean? To get, I don't know, man. I'm very suspicious of that sort of thing. I was wondering if you ever had any thoughts about that.
I think it. I mean, I think definitely media plays a role, but I think the arts get kind of a bad rap as it relates to society. Art reflects what's going on in society, right? And when you look at specifically music has always been an expression of whatever the drug culture is at that time, right? And so so I think like when we talk about like the music and it changing, we had to look at the social conditions that was going on at the time, and so like when you talk about groups like Farside and Diggable Planets and even Common Sense, back then, they were much. It was a much different. It was a more of a reflective, type of art form that was like contemplative and wanting to understand life and questioning social norms and these types of things. And I think it went from there to this dynamic of being like very gangster, right?
Yeah.
Being the tough guy, gangs, and then that's where a lot of things like harder drugs were in the community. The drug business was a thing. The dope boy became the coolest guy in the neighborhood, right? And then the transition out of that into more of a different type of a drug culture, where what we're talking about today, which was like the skinny jeans, the jerky, whatever. So I don't know. I think if you say like Miami Vice was a byproduct of the amount of cocaine that was being put on the streets and the glorification of that, then it's not like Miami Vice created the coke movement, you know what I mean, or the drug movement. It was just expressing what was going on. I think most music in general to this day is just expressing like drug culture that is being put on the streets.
But but I think what you're talking about, it basically goes back to that argument. What is it? Art imitating life versus life, life imitating art.
I think.
What? Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Greg. I think that was true. What you just described was true about Miami Vice. It was true about music until this point. I would say somewhere in the mid '90s, maybe a little bit later, definitely 2000, where it felt like somebody's like, all right, it's time to get that babysitter money. They're, basically, the older music appreciators, right?
Yeah.
Guys,
Yeah.
they're like, how come we don't have adults on the chart? Like before Britney Spears and all that garbage, we used to have adult experienced musicians, right, on the charts, right? Like with the big hits. Like the music quality was produced by experienced musicians, and it was amazing music. And then out of nowhere, somebody's like, you know what? We're gonna need to get that babysitter money, meaning women from 16 to 24,
even younger,
and younger, right? So that's where all the money. That's who all the money is spent on, right? Because for one reason or another, okay.
Yeah.
So it felt like everything became babysitter money. Like every business opportunity, every business venture was about getting money from that demographic, and everybody else was ignored. And I feel like that spread into everything. That's why what's his name? Who's producing Justin? What's his name? Justin.
That guy. The unfortunately, it's
the kid.
Justin Timberlake.
No. Him too, but I'm talking about Justin
Bieber.
Yeah. Who's it? Dr. Dre started producing it, right?
Something like that. Oh, I think we lost
Mordechai.
No, I'm here.
For a second.
Hold
Is that okay? Fine. Just resetting his internet.
Yeah, I just had to. Yeah, I can hear you fine. I just had to turn off my.
Okay, there he is.
Yeah, I'm back. My video back. But I was gonna say, you also got to look in mind, like when you look at 1999, 2000, 2001. You have to look at one of the biggest tours was the Hard Knock Life tour. I don't know if you guys remember that with Jay-Z.
Oh, Jay-Z and stuff. Yeah.
But those crowds and that audience were mostly white kids. So rap music went from being something very like in the inner city, in the hood, talking about these types of things, that were very rich, very deep. But then the commercialization of rap music came in. And then that coupled with the advancement of technology, making it cheaper to produce the product, right? Because what's the difference between classical music and rock and roll? It's much cheaper to have a studio full of musicians. I mean, it's much cheaper to have a studio of a band versus a studio of
4 guys versus 100 guys.
Right.
And then it goes even more and more and more, right? So the cost to produce the product became cheaper, and then you want to reach a broader audience. And so the white kids weren't necessarily trying to hear the depth stuff. They want to hear sensationalism, right? They want the action of it, right? And I'm not blaming it on white kids, but I'm just saying that played a big part from the De La Souls and the Common Senses, and people, and obviously they had a lot of white fans too, right? Wu-Tang fan, Wu-Tang Clan.
I really appreciated all that stuff. Yeah. I remember
but the kids who listen to pop music, and that they only connect you through the sensationalism, not the depth.
Mordechai, you mentioned you're mentioning this now, and then Frank, you kind of blame Biggie. I don't blame Biggie. You know who I do blame? Because you just said, Mordechai, you just say commercialization. You know who actually commercialized rap? Biggie's friend, P. Diddy.
Hey,
he's the guy.
I don't blame Biggie.
He's the guy that took it to that level.
I'm just talking about that's like
sure. That was the breaking point.
Hold on. On the timeline.
Yeah.
That's like a marker, like a milestone. Sure. I'm not saying the guy. Whatever. Maybe the guy himself.
I get it.
I'm not saying he's a good guy, but it's just that kind of music that he introduced.
Can I tell you something from my personal, just from like literally my family, how I know everything we're saying checks out? Because when my sister is 16 years younger than me, and when she was a kid, when she was like 5, I remember, we'd be in the car, me, my parents, and my sister, and my parents would purposely play for her. What would they play? They didn't play music that she, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old want to hear. They play music that they liked, like, I don't know, jazz, rock, fusion, or classical. And I had a friend at the time who actually he also had, his mom had a second kid at the same exact time. It was also, it was a girl. And I remember I was in the car with my friend, and his little sister was in the car, and this guy's playing Radio Disney. And I'm like, dude, why are you playing Radio Disney? And he's like, oh, it's for my sister. I'm like, bro, there's like study. I started telling him this. I'm like, there's studies if you play, sophisticated music for kids when they're young. There's studies on this about intelligence and academic results and all maturity, all these kind of things, development. And he was like, whatever. He was just like, oh, she's just a kid, And I hate to say this, I saw the result with my sister versus the result with this girl, and I literally came to the conclusion. I mean, like, it's really important. You mentioned, Frank, like babysitter money. I mean, like they target kids who are, now everybody's like on TikTok. All these girls are like 7, 8, 9. They're listening to like WAP. I'm not going to say what the acronym means. 8-year-old girls are listening to WAP. Forget about even the sexual stuff. I'm talking about just the stupidity of it. And that's what we're producing. We're producing people who don't know, who are chanting for Palestine, don't even know what the heck that means, or Israel, or anything else. And here we are. And I don't know. So, like,
Barney produced this generation of Columbia grads.
Barney. This is. I think they came after Barney. If anything, Barney was probably like the better part of it.
On a side note, one of the reasons I didn't like Biggie Smalls is because he sounds like he got sleep apnea. I don't know.
I think he did have sleep apnea.
You know what I mean? Like, he sounds like a fat guy. Hey, I'm not skinny, but and I know fat guys who have normal voices, but he sounds fat. You know what I mean? Is that just me? He sounds like he sounds like he wheezes. You know what I mean? Like he has trouble with a flight of stairs, and that's not good. It's not a good sound.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Mordechai, so I don't know. My original question, like, so in some of the things you've seen in the entertainment field, can you safely say that these people are involved in something that is kind of deeper than what we see on the surface, in a spiritual sense?
Let me cut through the shit. Are these people into Scientology / Satanism / Gnostic?
Scientology, we know.
I'm just saying, like, it seems like everybody is part of a secret, like some kind of secret. So there's a lot of. I don't want to use the terms that are popular to use right now, but in other words, they seem to be followers of Satan, or at least their understanding of the Sitra Achra.
The thing is, when you look at like media companies, you have to look at them like say, for example, you're an investor, right? So that's what you do. You invest into whatever. And so you have a portfolio. and you have different types of industries that you put certain amounts of money into. Many people that are very, very big investors, media and technology is part of their portfolio. So what happens is that if I have an agenda to like influence society in a particular way, say I'm an investor guy, right? I'm a rich guy, I'm a billionaire, and I have an agenda to influence society in a certain way, I'm going to use the tools that influence society. So one would be media, another could be technology, another could be politics. And so I want to influence it to have a certain outcome. So if I'm like say I'm a big stakeholder in a particular company, I'm going to have access to the chairman of that company, and that chairman pretty much give directives to the CEO, right? And then it goes down all the way to the guy in the mailroom, right? And so a lot of what media is today is, you could call it propaganda, right? It's there to achieve a specific goal for various reasons. Some would be considered negative by the definition of the Torah. Some could be seen as, positive, right? Like Nickelodeon, for example. Was it Sumner Redstone? He wrote about Nickelodeon. He said the goal with Nickelodeon was to create images and programming that showed kids of different ethnic backgrounds playing together, living together, not living together, but functioning together in societies to create this more like diverse, multicultural society that they wanted to see. Now you could argue against it and say, okay, well, maybe this came out of it or that came out of it. But that was a mission statement by those people at that time, that they felt good about, what they were doing, right? In many other aspects of music. And it's not just the artists themselves, it's even the beats, the speed of the music. You know what I'm saying? The beat progressions, the drums, all these things affect the individual. Like you guys have traveled around the world. Other places in the world, the music is much different, more melodic, but it's in conjunction with the social culture. In America, it's all about money, work, production. So hip hop has been a great catalyst to program the general population in this idea of money, this idea of competition, this idea of conquering, this idea of gloating, domination, these types of things. So you hear these sentiments there, but it's in sports, it's in politics, it's in the private sector and business. So these are like social themes, but they're all connected.
But these are social themes, but the question is, it seems like they're also, I mean, you mentioned it, like these things could be a product of society. So, is it safe to say that because society has gone the way of, and, due to education or lack thereof, the way of, there's basically a spiritual vacuum, right? So if there's a spiritual vacuum, with musicians or with any artists, there can never be a spiritual vacuum, meaning if there's going to be a vacuum as far as the God of what Frank and I call the Hebrew Scripture on this show, then whatever's going to fill that vacuum with these musicians and with Hollywood is going to just be something dark, or something that we call in Jewish parlance the sitracha, or these kind of things. Is that accurate, or am I completely?
Yeah, I mean, no. You're right. I mean, you're right. I mean, again, like for example, when I went to school, we had a theater program, right?
Yeah.
And so the theaters, all the thespians were in that, right? But the secret joke was that the thespians, they were the most wild, they were the most sexual, they were the most, you'll think it'll be the athletes and the cheerleaders, and that's, no, it was the thespians. So the culture in Hollywood is just it's like the most like creative, crazy people congregating,
Yeah.
and given an enormous amount of power, an enormous amount of autonomy. And now you see, like, there's political agendas. There's political agendas from China, political agendas from Russia. When you talk about Disney, all these things were, I mean, they talk about the propaganda with Disney all the way back to the 60s, 70s, right? So it's just in the cartoons, right? And so it's just saying that media has been used to do that, and there has been a concerted effort to undermine American society by removing its value systems, right? By removing those mechanisms I think I read somewhere that the people outside of the country see the power of America is the fact of how the citizens believe in America, right? They believe in the values, even if they don't live up to them, right? You know, they believe in these things, these different dynamics. And we saw that through the civil rights movement, right? Like, even though there was a group of people that were trained to see African Americans and other minorities a certain way, when their values were called out through the Constitution, like by Martin Luther King and these people, the vast majority of American society over time rose to accept those values versus those prior beliefs. So I think what we do see is a concerted effort in the media space to be a part of that engine to undermine the American value system, to ultimately undermine our democracy and our way of life.
Yeah, and you see, they use the people who are doing this, what you just described. They're always using something that is a good cause, right? Let's just use a slightly removed example. Let's say save the whales, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Just for instance, right? Which we should. I mean, that's good. You know, you want to save a species from getting extinct or from getting butchered or whatever. You know. So, but they never want. It's always the opposite. They call themselves save the whales, but their result is kill all the whales. That's what they're. It's always the same thing. And like you said, Nickelodeon, right? I remember, like, I was a little bit, like, I think it had that show Double Dare or something. I can't remember. Whatever.
Slime Time. You're talking about Double? Yeah, with that guy with the slime kids
I don't
in the
know.
head or whatever it
I watched
was.
some Nickelodeon shows,
Yeah.
like, for when it came out, but like 2 years later, I was already too old for that. But I remember what they were trying to do. What you were describing, to have kids, black kids, white kids, Chinese kids, and Spanish kids, and people from all kind of, all being friends, and that's good. That's good, but not if you are trying to make them all stupid. You understand? It depends on the context. You want people to be together and to have equal opportunities, right? And to improve. You want them to improve. What they're trying to do is to take everyone and to make them not improve. Quite the opposite. It's communism. That's exactly communism. It's trying to take everybody, make them the same in terms of poverty and misery.
Socialism.
So socialism, statism, just as a more general term, statism in general, because there's many different forms to it. So that's why I'm always going to be, I guess I'm always going to be suspicious against anything having to do with Hollywood, because when you mentioned that the thespians, right? And I was struggling because I'm very immature to not make a lesbian joke, because whatever. But so I'm gonna not do that. I'm just gonna say that the people who were involved in the drama club and the thespians, they might have some creativity, but to me, creativity is more with music, right? And with, let's say, like, painters and sculptors who are divorced from modernistic interpretations of art, right? Like, for instance, like, people make a big deal about Jackson Pollock, who threw up on a canvas, and all of a sudden it's I think that was the beginning of the decline of human creativity and the pursuit of perfection, which humans can never achieve perfection, but we're supposed to pursue it. Actually, that's the nature of the human being and God, right? Like, we're supposed to mimic, we're supposed to try to emulate God, knowing we'll never achieve his perfection, but there's always something to strive for. That's the nature of our relationship. So I think what they did was they tried to, we went from Jackson Pollock, I think, around that time, or even with Picasso, and then, we ended up with tampon in a teacup as, and that's art.
Or feces smeared on the image of Mary, and not that I'm a fan of.
I got the tampon in a teacup from Gavin McInnes, whatever. So the point is that there seems to be, when it comes to actors specifically, right? and I'm not talking about theater, mostly, television and movies. I think that the thespians, right? I think this is a group of people who are basically, I'm not going to say they're psychopaths, but they're definitely sociopaths. Because what do they do? They're emotional manipulators. They're professional bullshit artists. They're professional LARPers. Nothing about them is real, right? And they are exalted for. Oh, I'm not a fan of Malcolm X, but I think when people picture Malcolm X, they should picture Malcolm X and not Denzel Washington. You understand what I'm saying? There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong.
You're saying there's something wrong with that Denzel Washington was able to literally do him so well in every way that
we don't know that. We don't know if he actually did a good job, right?
No, I mean you could literally watch interviews of Malcolm X from back in the day on YouTube, and then you can watch clips of Denzel, and you could see, like, besides the fact that he kind of resembles him in certain ways.
I don't think there's any resemblance, but I don't know. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't look like that. But to me, but the point is, it's like you're getting famous, and you're getting all this credit, like you are Malcolm X, for pretending to be him on a TV screen. There's something sociopathic about that. I'm not picking on Denzel Washington. He's not the worst of them. He's probably the best.
But can I ask you a question, dude? Don't you think there's like a value? You know how you always say, like, that I do impressions of different voices and this and that. There's like at least like when Jamie Foxx did what's his name, Ray. That was really not just in the voice, but everything.
No, I disagree.
You weren't impressed by that at all?
No, not at all. It was. I saw that. It was like it sucked. And
really?
The same thing. Look. For instance, Ray Charles, right? If you in my opinion, I like Ray Charles' music. If you want to experience like Ray Charles, there's a scene in Blues Brothers where they go to buy like used instruments because they need to play a venue, and it's his store, right? And then they start playing music. It's Jamie Foxx doesn't come anywhere near. Ray Charles was an extremely talented musician, okay? And I'm just sick and tired of people getting credit for pretending to be someone. Do you understand? Like any example of that.
That's acting, man. Yeah, that's acting.
People should be like I remember one time Jude Law, right? It shocked me when I heard this. It kind of like it made me come online where these people actually think that they're important. These people actually think there's such a air of self-importance about them. Like something was going on with Sean Penn, I remember, and then like Jude Law was like outraged. He's like, he's one of our most important actors, as if like they're saving the world with their bullshit.
Yeah,
there's that's just one quality, but essentially, leftists in general, statists, okay, they're all actors. I'm not saying every actor is a leftist, but all leftists are actors, whether they're in Hollywood or in politics. Okay, where they know how to feign human
empathy,
emotions. They're psychos. They're empty inside, but they study carefully what real humans feel and how
react
they react, and they know how to mimic that. Okay, and they do that all the time. And it's like Hillary Clinton's. You want to see the most obvious. Like she starts speaking Southern when she's talking to some. You got to be kidding me. They're absolute shameless psychopaths. Shameless. Okay. And this is what is being used to manipulate people. I saw this. There's this famous conversation. I think his name is Horowitz. I don't remember. He was speaking at, I think it was UCLA back in 2014, and he was trying to explain to people what Hamas is and what the Muslim Brotherhood is and all this kind of stuff. And you had you had a Muslim student in the audience. And
the Freedom Center guy, yeah. I know what you're talking about, yeah.
With the she was wearing the whole keffiyeh, and she was acting, like you could see she was like taking cues and trying to do her emotional manipulation, her, you know, her psycho thing. And he just kind of like, he made her unravel. He's like, listen, do you support the, the hunting down of all Jews in the world? She's like, yes. Finally, made her got to the point. You said,
Yeah.
So that's what they are. Hollywood, that's what they are. That's what it is. It's an association of empty sociopaths who know how to mimic human emotion and manipulate human sentiment. That's what they are. I mean, to me.
Well, Mordechai, I mean, I'll just kind of I'll just say, we know that's true, and maybe you can comment on this. Again, it goes back to my original question. You know, the movie that came out, it was a year ago, Sound of Freedom, produced by who I like to call Caviezel, James Caviezel. So that movie was actually produced. He made that movie in 2018. You know, the girl in the movie, I don't know if you saw the movie. She was when the movie was filmed, she was like 11. I think she's like, when the movie came out, she was like 15 or 16, because no studio, no studio would pick it up, or the studio. Well, it was his studio, but the theaters didn't want to play the movie. Why didn't they want to play the movie? Because it speaks to something. A lot of people are saying that's something that they or their friends are involved in, which is trafficking little kids. Frank and I, I can tell you, Frank and I took a trip last summer to the border, to the Texas-Mexico border. We met up with some folks, and they showed us some information that, to the affirmative. We saw a couple of places where, some of these kids are literally physically taken. It's like literally like an empty Walmart somewhere, like in, Brownsville, Texas. They come in, they're processed, and then they're sent to God knows where, certain, homes, certain families, and you don't know what happens to them. You see them, there's like images of them being carried across the border, and they're sleeping, and you think they're sleeping on their parents' shoulder. No, they've been drugged. And one has to wonder, why would theaters, who told theaters, let's put it that way, who told theaters not to carry these movies? And finally, when they did, it was limited release in certain, let's say half the theaters or a third of the theaters. I think the movie made still $150 million. They say if it would have been in every theater, it would have been bazillions, like billions. And I don't know. I just feel like there's something, underneath the surface in Hollywood, and it's like once it comes out, oh my God, it's gonna like, we're not gonna be shocked, but a lot of people are gonna be shocked.
Well, I'll say like this. I'll say one of the things that I think working in Hollywood has really helped my own personal growth spiritually.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, because the thing is, and I think a lot of the frustration that we see people that will kind of like see themselves on the right, the Trump people, make America great again, these types of ideas, is that, like before I came to Israel, I ran for U.S. Congress, right? I ran for politics.
Good.
And for the Republicans in Los Angeles. And before that, I was involved in the Republican Party, but before that, I was involved in community organizing, right? My mom, whatever, but it was by the same organization that trained Obama, right? Out of Chicago, but I did it in LA, right? It was called Industrial Areas Foundation. And then I did some of it. Anyways, long story short, when I was involved with them, it was like my intro. I really actually fell in love with politics through learning about community organizing, because I saw like how people could come together through, democratic thought, through democracy, and be able to make changes to their life. They could change their neighborhood, they could shift fund, especially, in America specifically, right? But the thing that, one of the things I was most intrigued by was workforce development. And so at the time, this is probably around like 2014 type of thing, the big topic on the table was like basically this whole automotive, or not automotive, but what do they call them?
Automated.
Automotive.
Automated, like when you don't need physical when you need human employees anymore, it's just automation and basically robots.
You said automation. So that transition to robot technology from where we were, the issue is that the school system was not producing any of the thinkers that are going to be able to contribute and participate in this economy that was emerging. And so the question was, should they hold back the technology and to give the average person to time to rechange the school systems and education to it? Anyways, the point is, when I saw that, and coupled with my background in entertainment of creating messages, ideas, and concepts to influence people, I said, you know what? None of this is real. The whole thing is just a one construct of a group of guys who came together and said, this in the early 1900s, this in the 1800s, this in the 1700s, this in the 1600s. The whole thing, none of it's ever been real, right? And so we have this affinity to what makes us feel safe. And so as that goes away, like, I mean, you think about the outrage from Frank Sinatra to Elvis Presley, right? To Elvis Presley to the Beatles, right? That was literally Satan, right? To the vast majority of people. This was the devil reincarnated, where the Beatles with this long hair and this and smoking joint. So it's just saying the whole thing is made up, right? And coming to that conclusion in life allowed me to really let go of the world and say, like, you know what, I get it. There's a new commercial, there's a new algorithm, there's a new beat, there's a new wardrobe, there's a new thing or whatever. And guess what? It's all constructed by a group of guys like me sitting in a room. And there's millions and millions of people that are affected by it, that, like you're saying, are empty, that have no guidance, have no sense of direction. They're completely connected to what's going on around them, and they
Mordechai.
go for it. Yeah.
Not like you, okay? You could say just a group of guys in the sense that they're human, maybe, but they ain't like you. I just wanted to say, please continue, all right?
Okay, fine. But what I'm saying is, I don't think everybody in these rooms has ill intent. You know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of people that got into the entertainment business that I grew up with, and we know, and we believe, there was a time, I'm telling you, before I got involved into spirituality, I believe that we could just make the right movie or the right music artist and the right concept, and we could change everything and improve the world. And I believe that. Like, I was innocent in that way. Or even when I got involved in politics, I was like, yeah, all we got to do is bring the right policies and get the people to understand the truth, this whole thing. So there are people that I personally know and still have relationship with that are humongous executives that are good people, that are good people, that are dreamers, that want to see a better world, that believe in art, the power of creativity. And then there's other people that see it only as a social engine, right? So when I say guys like me, I'm saying that, like, there's people who are intelligent people that say, okay, well, we're going to push these ideas in this way through television. We're going to do some movies. We're going to influence fashion. We're going to have this music. We're going to, go to the education system and get this type of learning curriculum in. And then over the course of 5 to 10 years, this is going to be the end product of the type of citizen. This is what it is. So it's just accepting that reality and not necessarily demonizing everybody, right? Because there are good intentions, but without the Torah, without that guidance system, you're going to have chaos. It's just what it is. Like, unless that is the focus of transformation of self, looking within, expanding the mind, expanding the intellect in a godly perspective, this is what you're going to get. There's nothing around it. Like,
Mordechai, I want to ask you, like, follow up to what you're saying. Like, I don't know about Frank, I don't know about you, but I personally think, like, based on what you're saying, also Mordechai, that there's, like, people like who were your colleagues, and even some of the executives who have, like, good intentions and all the rest of it, but then there's people above them,
exactly,
who have certain, obviously spiritual agendas. So now the people above them have a couple of bucks, and they're like, listen, they're telling them, their underlings, or even like the CEO of the thing, you're going to do what I want, or it's your job. And sometimes they don't even reveal their intentions to these folks, and they just say, like, okay, here, we're going to make this crappy movie, or we're going to do, or like in these corporations, we're going to do ESG because we want to do the environment and all this kind of stuff. But they know that it's just like they're just doing their their ritual, and and they don't care if they lose money, because they have they're printing all the money in the world.
It's not about profit.
Yeah, it's not about profit. You could tell, because they're losing a boatload of money and they're still going ahead with the damn thing. That means that they're a cult. But I have a feeling that the middle managers and even some of the CEOs are not part of the cult. the people above them are, running that stuff.
There's a
We
certain
we don't know who they are.
Let's look at it from a we've been looking at it from our level up. Let's look at it from a different level, from up down. So you got God who controls everything. He there's statements that there's a verse in Isaiah that says, "I created light and I created darkness." Okay, so we know that God, the way he decided to run the world, he uses messengers. We're all messengers. Everything is a messenger. Every aspect of his creation, but he has messengers, which we call angels or whatever. There's no real translation for these words. So we have an entire department of servants of God, right? Which we call the Sitra Achra. I like to say that this is called the free will department. This is the department that God put in place to facilitate human free will. Now, it's a real department. There's real living beings, intelligent living beings that are that they're tasked with creating this. So basically what I'm saying for the folks at home is God created the side of evil, the evil department. In that department, there were real alive beings, okay, which are there to facilitate the existence of evil in the world for the purpose of giving human beings choice. Because in order to practice your free will, you have to have alternatives to God's will. In order for you to choose to be with God, there has to be alternative choices. Okay, so that's the purpose of the existence of evil. Now, most people who study Torah, right? Most people, the average person, they don't get into the details of the mechanisms and the gears within all the spiritual realities, but it exists with a high level of detail and a high level of sophistication. So we call that the Sitra Achra, the side of evil, the free will department. So obviously the main manager or whatever is Satan, which is not a name. It's not the name of a being. It's a job title. Okay, it just means opponent. All right, that's like manager of evil, whatever you want to call it. Okay, and then he has underlings or whatever that were. There's a whole detailed substructure, but the point is that there's a non-human aspect to the side, and then there's, at some point, it connects to the human side of things. Okay, there are human liaisons to these non-human spiritual entities, which are part of this, evil, the side of evil. Okay, so when me and Greg are talking about this, generally we're talking about the point where it goes from the non-human to the human part on that level, on those levels. Okay, and we speculate about where does it begin. Like, who is it? Klaus Schwab? Is he the main human liaison to the to the spiritual entities which are running this whole department, or are there other human beings that nobody knows their name, that it's much more secretive, and so on and so forth? So we're talking to somebody from Hollywood. We're wondering, have you seen any of this evil shit? Pardon my French. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing you think. Yeah, I was gonna say, the way that I got into Judaism was through the Kabbalah Center, right? And I was there for several years. And when I was there, it was the height of their celebrityism. So the first Shabbat I ever went to was everybody who was anybody in Hollywood was sitting there and the whole thing. So I was just everybody that I'm trying to be like is here trying to get some spiritual knowledge, right? But the point is, I learned basic ideas about, like you're saying, the Sitra Achra, the dark side, all these different dynamics as a non-Jew, right? I converted years later, right? And so I just remember being aware of that and feeling that, going into MTV's office and be like, this is dark. You just walking through this whole thing. I remember Chris Brown, he went on a tour with the group The New Boys, and this was after he had this whole Rihanna situation, whatever. And I just remember looking at him and just almost seeing something on his shoulders. You know what I'm saying? So it's just saying, so the system itself is designed by the Sitra Achra. The whole system, the whole mechanism, the offices, the protocols, the structure, whatever. And so as certain souls plug in to that supply chain, right? Because the supply chain is going to this kind of like endless place of like pure darkness. There's a whole line of people that are facilitating it. And to the point that if something comes in that disrupts that, they all attack, right? So it's a real thing. It's a real thing. They call it leftism, they call it liberalism, these type of things, but it's really the philosophy of the Sitra Achra, right? Which is to create this demoralized, empty human being that is basically at the behest of the energy flow that's being put down. You know what I'm saying? So you have the CEO. They're going to put the most twisted guy. Like you get to know this guy, this person. If you look at their personal lives, it's dark. You know what I mean? They're doing the most dark stuff. Why? Because they need to be a vessel for that Sitra Achra.
Yeah.
Nicely put.
I wanted to.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, like, I'm not comparing you to Howard Stern in any way. So I'm just qualifying that from the beginning at all. Because I actually never liked the guy. But I remember in the movie. Remember he had a movie. Was it Howard? I forgot the name of the movie. But in the 90s.
I'm listening. I'm just going to turn my camera on 1 second.
Private Parts.
I'm gonna plug my phone in, but this one I'm listening. I'm just turning my camera.
No problem. So
it was called Private Parts.
Right. So the movie starts off with him wearing this ridiculous like fart man or something like that costume. And he's narrating. He's like portraying himself as a newcomer to this, to the entertainment industry or something like that. And he's like, he goes, most of these people are devil worshippers, right? Like he literally said that in the movie. I don't know.
Yep. Mordechai, based on what you're saying about Kabbalah Center, I'll mute you. Is it safe? Is it safe to say that a lot of the people that you saw who were Hollywood people at Kabbalah Center, who we now see are into all kinds of, shall we say, interesting things? Is it safe to say that they took the knowledge, they took what they learned at Kabbalah Center and used it for nefarious spiritual purposes? Because this is the same reason why, for example, our rabbis, your rabbis at Or Sameach or my rabbis at wherever I learned, you come up to them or any rabbis really, and they say two things. They say before you learn Kabbalah, learn Chumash, learn the basics, learn the Torah, and then go on to, learn the 5 books of Moses, learn the Talmud, learn the whole thing, and then you can move on to Kabbalah. The second thing I've heard is you have to be very careful. This could be very dangerous, meaning what they call practical Kabbalah. So I feel like these people, Madonna, all these other people, they went there, they learned what they learned, and then they, and then they left. They went wherever they went. They maybe took other things, other practices, mixed it with Kabbalah, and created this whole new thing. Or maybe they just using Kabbalah for in and of itself. Would you say that that's like
Mordechai? Before you answer that, I apologize, Greg. I also apologize to you.
Mm-hmm.
The terms that we're using are going to be a little bit esoteric for the audience right now. So I just wanted to explain what we're talking about. Right now, you're watching 3 Orthodox Jews. 3 Orthodox Jews have a discussion. Okay, the Kabbalah Center is not part of traditional Jewish orthodoxy or just traditional classical Judaism. Okay, what they did was the Kabbalah Center. They took our sacred texts, right, and they began teaching them in a sort of kind of like a self-help kind of. They turned it into some kind of like, or presented it as a self-help program. And there's a problem with that. That in itself is not bad. But here's the thing. Kabbalah, right? Most people have no idea what they're talking about when they say that. Is a commentary. It's our tradition in the Torah as to how to know God better, more intimately, and to serve Him more. Which means how to do God's commandments even with more fervor. and with more strictness. Everything that God said to do in the Hebrew scripture, right? All the commands, right? We have 613 statements, verses in the Hebrew scripture that tell us that God wants us to do this. All right, there's specific commands, right, that God stated in the Hebrew scripture of what he wants Jews to do and non-Jews to do. Okay, different roles, but he stated his desire for both. So Kabbalah is a commentary on the Hebrew scripture, and it's teaching us how we should desire greatly, with great love, to do God's will very intimately and very passionately, and with more strictness. But the Kabbalah Center doesn't teach that at all. What they did was they took the teachings, right? They took some of our texts, and they made it they made it as surface level, as shallow as possible, because they don't. And Mordechai, if I'm wrong, please correct me. They don't emphasize observance of the commandments. Okay, they just are emphasizing the teachings and feeling the profundity of its depth. But that's not the point of Kabbalah. The point of Kabbalah is to make a person more active and to take a more active and personal role in fulfilling the commandments that are stated in the Hebrew scripture. So the main criticism that Kabbalah centers get from traditional Orthodox Jews is that they don't emphasize observance. I just wanted to explain that to the folks at home, because most of them can't make a distinction between real Judaism and what is being presented as. So, sorry, please, I'm going to shut up now. You continue. Greg, restate your question, please.
So my question is the same. Is it safe to say that Hollywood people, people like Madonna and other people sat in in these classes? I actually attended one of these classes just to see kind of what it is, because I have a friend, actually a Russian Jewish guy, who has been involved with Kabbalah Center in Manhattan. I think I mentioned to you, for many years. And I remember he was involved in a program for Russian-speaking Jews in Brooklyn, like a Torah program. That's how we met. And then he told me he was in Kabbalah Center, and I was trying to kind of like, I was kind of trying to slowly kind of nudge him away from it. But then he was like, "Listen, man, you want to come see for yourself, like it's one of those things where like, you honestly cannot make a critique of something unless you see it for yourself." Like, okay, let me go. He invited me to one of these intermediate classes in Manhattan. I sat in the class. I noticed two things. It was, first of all, it was a lot of people, very, well-to-do, professionals. And I actually saw, whatever, I don't know if you want me to say, but I saw the comedian Modi Rosenberg there at the class. I recognized him.
He was there when I was there too.
Yeah, this was in like 2014 in the city. And I sat there. So I sat there, and the guy, it was an Israeli teacher. He's wearing a kippah. He's teaching about the Parsha, the Torah portion of the week, and the, I guess, the Zohar commentary on that. And interestingly enough, I understood everything he was teaching. Not that I'm a Kabbalah master, but I'm talking about, at the very least, the terminology, if not the concepts themselves. And, there was I remember distinctly, there was a guy sitting next to me asking me, because there was like a handout sheet, and he's just like, it was actually had to do with, the Cohen's vestments, the ephod, and how each part of the ephod connected to the, right now we're actually counting. It's a whole explanation for the folks at home, but I'll tell you more. We're counting sphera, so every ephod piece connects to every sphera, and he was talking about that, and I was like, wow, this is very cool. And the guy next to me is like, do you have any idea what he's talking about? And I'm like, yes. He's like, can you explain it to me? I'm like, not on one foot. And and then I realized that half the room doesn't know what's flying, even if they're in the intermediate course, and half the room is not Jewish. And this is not, against anybody. It's just like, you gotta be a Torah student. You gotta be a Torah scholar. Most non-Jews, now we see there's like this phenomenon, non-Jews learning Torah, learning Humash, learning different things, even Talmud. But that is another issue there. I don't know if you agree or disagree, Mordechai, that, half of each class is non-Jewish people. And again, I realize that like people are learning things, and this is something I was trying to tell my friend who was involved with them. I said, man, you're learning all this stuff, but you're not tapping into it at the, that's at basic level, because you're not keeping Shabbat, and you're not. And it's interesting, he started keeping Shabbat and kosher like slowly after that, because he actually met his wife through Kabbalah Center, who then converted like legit, and now they keep Shabbat and kosher and all the rest of it. But he told me that most of the people at Kabbalah Center do not. They're just going, like Frank said, they're just going there at best for like the kind of the self-help aspect, and the, how to improve as a person, how to see the world, how to tap into this, how to tap into that, whatever. But I feel like the celebrities, either they knew what they knew going in, and they took Kabbalah and they turned it into like this cholent, and they started doing what they're doing, or they just learned certain things and they used it for dark purposes. So what is your take on that? It's a long question. I know it's a long question, man. What's your take on that?
No, it's okay. Yeah. So I would put a precursor out there that I cannot speak for the Kabbalah Center as a whole, as a corporation, as a business, all these different things. Because there's so many stories I've heard. This, is it true? Is it not true? I don't know. All I could do is speak about my experience, right? And I kind of understood my experience there much later. Someone sent me my essay written by Yehuda Ashlag, right? Who a lot of the teachings of the center is behind. And he wrote, basically they call it a kuntras, like a pamphlet around this idea of shofar Mashiach. That's what he calls it. But basically the idea is like this. His argument was, and again, it's all types of arguments, right? There's all types of arguments. Rabbi Ginsburg has an argument, Rabbi Morgenstein has all these different people have different arguments about what's the right way to do, what's not the right way to do, different things, right? So Rabbi Ashraf's argument was that in the past, that the Jewish community, the rabbis, from the point of being in diaspora, had this idea to conceal the information of what the Torah is, the inner essence of it. They refer to it as the paninius, the inner aspect, right? Like there's an external aspect, there's an internal aspect. And so the idea was to conceal that internal aspect, because the fear in what we saw was people using it for, like you're saying, avodah zarah, for idol worship, right? So that was the point. So their argument was, Rob Ashlag and his teachers or constituents, is that when the time of the Rabbi Isaac Luria was born, which was 500 years ago, that this was a kind of like the start of this new era. Like him being alive and him coming into this world, bringing these ideas, was this new era. And then in this new era, that the other nations are gonna. It was a shift in energy where they won't want anything to do with truth. And as we go closer and closer and closer to the times of Mashiach, that the world will become more and more disgusted by truth. But the problem is that because we concealed so much of the Torah, that the other nations, like the Christian nations and the Islamic nations, he uses the term, they took pages from our holy scriptures and formed entire religions, and entire religions that ultimately oppressed the Israel, right? That oppressed us, right? Yeah. And not only that, they even took the notion and said they're the chosen people, right? These different groups, right? And so, or their ideology is of the chosen path. And so his understanding was, and you see some Rabbanim say today, that if you put the Torah out there and you let the other nations, the goyim, the nations, see the greatness of the Torah, that they will see through their ideologies and belief systems and spiritual structures that they have, and see that actually they're like not even anything. They're basically nothing. And I could just speak for myself. I could say for myself that my parents grew up Christian. In college, like a lot of African Americans, they kind of got into Islam, right? But they kind of understood it from like a black pride, black national. That's the way it was shaped by the Nation of Islam. But then they kind of like saw through that, and then they got into things like Sufism, right? Which is kind of like a more of a spiritual outlook on it, whatever. And then ultimately they kind of even got away from that and got into like things like therapy and working on yourself and emotional intelligence. So most of my life we weren't a part of like any mosque or anything like that. We just, we had our belief systems. We believed in one God. The month of Ramadan would come. We would fast. There was no political associations with it. It was just like my parents were like Black people that grew up in the South that saw Black people being hung and murdered in the name of Christianity, right? And so going into college and being exposed to different cultures and people and professors and this, whatever, they both kind of like independently got into this thing. Anyways, long story short, so when I came to the Kabbalah Center, I wasn't looking for anything per se. You know what I mean? I met a girl who was like cute, kind of like you met this guy, you guys were friends. I met this girl and she was going there and I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, you go there. She just told me over a dinner conversation casually. And I just said, okay, I wouldn't mind going too. And I'm telling you, the first time I went to that introduction lecture, I'm telling you, I was sitting in there and I was like, I've been waiting my whole life to hear this. You know what I mean? Like, I've been waiting my whole life, not necessarily the Kabbalah Center. You know what I'm saying? Look where I'm at right now. So it wasn't that, right? But it sparked something in me that was so incredibly deep. And the teachings that I learned when I was there allowed me to reanalyze everything: Islam, the Quran, the history, this. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, what is it connected to? What is the Islamic calendar? Where does it even come from? They made it up. And I'm not trying to disrespect any of your Muslim listeners or viewers or Christians. I'm talking about my journey, right? So what I saw for me, you may not see it, and you're not supposed to see it, or vice versa, right? So I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just talking about my personal thing. So I was able to look at basic things like the Quran, for example, right? So Muhammad, right? Where's his connection to Israel? There is no connection, right? So he's connected to Ishmael. Okay, fine. He's connected to Ishmael. Let's say that's true. Even the book, the Quran, he never wrote it. He never wrote the book. He had 40-something scribes, and he was supposed to be a literate man. So the first question is, how do you even know what they wrote was correct? That's one. And they were writing it on like leaves and rocks and things. It was just like this kind of like prophecy, hippie-trippy type of thing. And I'm not trying to put it down. Then later, 70 years after he died, that community compiled what they call today the Quran. And even then, they had all these different versions. They call them caliphs. Every caliph had a different version of what this Quran was. And to this one particular caliph said, burn all the other Qurans, and this is going to be the standard one. So when the Muslims say, oh, we got the original Quran, no, you have the original one that was accepted by this last particular ruler person who's not a prophet, that no divine anything, no nothing, just a guy who whatever. The hadith that they have was written 250 years after their prophet died. And the guy who wrote it down, his name was Bukhari. And he went house to house and asked people who lived in Mecca and Medina and said, what did you hear the prophet did? And he wrote it down. And that's their halakha. That's their Talmud. The whole system of Islam comes out of the hadith. The hadith was created by a guy who's a historian that went around. And then you go into the calendar, right? The whole calendar, the whole matrix of time, space, and motion. I wouldn't be able to ask these questions if it wasn't for Kabbalah, right? I wouldn't even be able to ask, what's time, what's space, what's the meaning of it? Praying throughout the day, where does this even come from, right? So it's just saying that when you strip these things down, the whole thing falls apart. And I didn't have a choice but to convert. You know what I'm saying? I had no choice to want a real bris milah. I had no choice to really want to go in the mikvah. I had no choice but to want to wrap tefillin, to be in the minyan, to eat kosher food, to all these things. You know what I'm saying? So it's just saying that, like, for a lot of people, I'm sure it is what it is, but I'm saying on the philosophy of Rav Ashlag, anybody who was sincere, because I know other people who converted to Kabbalah Center too, that live in LA, that have kids, family, live very frum lives. Yeah. Anybody who's sincere, I think maybe they got that connection. Maybe it had nothing to do with the sinner. Maybe it just had to do with God's influence on that person, right, in their heart. But I will say that this critical analyzation of spirituality and text and being a human being and having a soul, and your soul having a desire, and your body having a desire, in the world around you and nature, no one is even asking these questions. There's no university in America that asks you the question about your soul or the dynamic of your soul, what your soul needs, what is reality. I mean, you may have quantum physics that may go into, like, you know, the human eye sees less than 1% of reality, and we only see light particles, images are formed in the back of the brain. you have those discussions, right? You got string theory that talks about 10 different or 11 different dimensions, as they say, of energy. So you have these things, but in terms of a complete system that has to do with me, that's why that's why the world's in the state that it is, because the whole yoke of education in the world only deals with the external reality, as that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what the Kabbalah Center did for me. That's what the Rob Berg, people's a controversial person. He was put in harem by Vadia Yosef and many other great Rabbanim who I look up tremendously. So there is that dichotomy in terms of my experience. But I'm just saying for myself, if it wasn't for those teachings, I mean, I could be on the Free Palestine side, marching, right? I mean, like, what would be the difference? Oh, people are dying, genocide. Oh, bad things are happening. Oh, where's my sign at? Let me go and join in, right? Like, I wouldn't even have the ability to think that, oh, wait, no, that's actually an agenda. And actually, the Palestinian people are suffering by Hamas, right? And most of the Palestinians don't even want to be in Palestine, but they weren't even allowed to leave as refugees because it's a whole concerted effort to use them for billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah. It sounds to me, Mordechai, that basically it seems like, I mean, number one, we understand that Hashem had you go through this pathway. Obviously this was just a vehicle.
Yeah.
I don't mean to minimize it, but it was the vehicle. But also, it seems like you already have, kind of the pre-built or healthy neshama, the vessel, to be able to say, I'm learning this here at this place, but I'm gonna go now, leave, and I'm gonna go, to yeshiva in Israel and learn it from.
So first I converted. First I left.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I converted, and actually Yehuda Berg, the controversial, his that's the Rob Berg son. He's the one who told me to get out of there. He's the one. He came to me. He's like, bro. He said, you have a Jewish neshama, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
So it's almost like he knows.
Neshama. What do you mean?
That answered my question. I was going to ask you, does something I never considered before? Does the Kabbalah Center, as policy, do they promote? Are they for people leaving the Kabbalah Center and going to traditional Orthodox learning institutions, yeshivot? Like, is that something they promote? If they feel
it's not something I was promote. I had a personal relationship with the family. Even my whole family came to the Kabbalah Center. Right? It wasn't just me. My younger sister, she also converted. Her and her husband. She's a professor out in Atlanta, whatever. But the point is just saying that he told me himself. He was like, bro, you've been here for years. You have a Jewish neshama, right? And I was doing all the marketing for the Kabbalah Center too, by the way. I was designing many of the programs there. Now they have the Kabbalah University, all these things. I was there innovating these things, helping them because of my background in that type of thing. But he told me, he's like, bro, you have a Jewish neshama, and it's just like, you're not going to find a girl who's going to want to live like this, you're not going to want to, she's not going to want to do this Shabbat stuff, this, blah, blah, blah. And he says, and the girls here, so so the point is the same. So he's like, you got to go. He said, you got to go. He said, you got to go and be great. You got to be great. You have to leave the center. You're probably never going to come back again once you go out there, but you got to go and be great. And I was like, and it took me months or even almost a year to receive that message he gave to me. And then I had friends of mine who were also at the Kabbalah Center. Their parents were. So I grew up with them for like 7-8 years. And so they started going to Isha Torah in LA as Baal Tshuva. And they would ask me, oh, you should come. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm at the house, good. So one day, one of my friends, this guy Yosef, comes to my apartment. He's like, bro, I was at this lecture, and I turned around and I saw this black guy there. And I was like, why isn't Mordechai here? Why is he not hearing this? And so I went. I went to an Isha Torah class in LA. This guy, Rabbi Jacobson, I think his name was, or Jacobs. And they were, Kiruv at that time, they were using a lot of Kabbalah stuff, right? Like Kabbalah concepts, this, whatever. And so I was like, whoa, like this is like almost just like the center, but way more chill. People my age, because the center is like all older people, you know what I mean? Like people my age, girls, this, blah, 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 blah. And then that's how I got in. And next thing you know, someone invites me over to a Shabbat meal, this, blah, blah. And then I'm like, dude, okay, fine. What am I going to do now? And then I get hooked up. I meet this one rabbi who that real popular rapper. I'm not gonna say his name, in LA, and he wanted to charge me all this money for my conversion program. It's just like, okay, like I get it, right? And then I met another rabbi through another guy who I met who's African American who just converted, and so he had this Moroccan rabbi in LA. And so I was friends with this African American guy, and Rabbi would always be calling me like, "Are you okay? What are you doing? This, blah blah." And I was like, "Wow, like that, like he really loves this guy. He really cares about this guy." So his name's Rabbi Afuta, and I met with him, and then I went through a conversion process. It took me like 2 years. You know, it was like 2 best years of my life. And then after that, I stayed in LA, you know, just trying to figure out, like, because like after you convert, you're just like a fish out of water. And the thing is, I didn't realize the conversion process was going to be this like intense, not the process of just, you know, every day coming to shul, whatever. I'm not on learning. I love that. Like, I love that. The issue was after I went into the mikveh, how your whole system changes. And you never realize it. You're like, okay, I go in the water, they take some blood, you know, okay, shkoyach, bracha, very nice. I went to, you know what's something? The first mikvah I ever did is when I went with the Kabbalah Center. I came to Israel in 2004 with Madonna, the whole thing, right? And I came, and the first mikvah I ever did was at the Arizal. That was the first.
In Tzfat, there's a result
up north.
It's very,
right?
it's very cold. It's a very
There's a
cold.
funny story behind it. It's like, if you could imagine, 2004, I walk into a mikveh with my hat on backwards and this and all these guys, you know, like just normal, you know, cool guy, whatever, shorts, the whole thing, and then all these Hasidim in there, and then I start, and the guys were take off your clothes, and I'm like, why? Take off your clothes. I started taking off my clothes. The Hasidus guys, they all moved on the side, and the guys who were the Kabbalah Center started pushing me forward. He said, just go. And you go in this mikveh, I thought I was gonna die. It was the coldest thing ever, right?
Yeah, it was very cold.
It was the coldest thing ever I've ever experienced in my life. It was so cold. But the point is saying that that process of figuring out who I was in LA, and there was a rabbi in Los Angeles, Rabbi Zachai, who's a rabbi at Netzach, which is a huge Persian shul in LA in Beverly Hills. He said, he told me, he said, Mordechai, why don't you just go to yeshiva for a few months? You know, you could come back, you could help the community so much and do, you know, kiruv and help these type of things while you're doing your other projects. And I was like, okay. And at the time I wanted to get married. And I was like, yeah. And he said, there's a lot of girls there, you get set up. And I'm like, that was it. He said, there's girls there. And so I came to Israel in 2016, and immediately I came from the plane, went straight to the hotel from the taxi. I just said, take me to the hotel, because I've been thinking about it forever, for years, right? So I just said, take me to the hotel. All my bags are still in the taxi. I go there, dive and whatever, blah, blah. I go and stay with a lady, not a lady, but she set me up, this lady, Ahuva Gray. She's a very popular African-American writer. She lives in B.I.G. So I went there, I stayed there for a month before yeshiva. And then I went to Or Sameach, and I was too old to be in the dorms, right? So I was too old to be in the dorms. So where did I end up staying at? In Meir Sharing, Base Israel. So my first experience living in Israel was in Base Israel. All of my roommates were guys by the Mir, because I got set up in the Mir Dira, Mir apartment for the yeshiva, the Mir yeshiva. So
Mordechai, can I tell you something?
Yeah.
I have my first experience before yeshiva. I had the same identical experience in 2012. I lived in Base Israel in a dorm of it was like a pre-yeshiva program of guys who already like went through the system, and some of them grew up religious. Very Haredi place, and I was just living there for 3 weeks. And that was like, I came from Tel Aviv, and because I was already like learning, I was just ready to go to yeshiva, but that's where they had us living for 3 weeks. I was like, Mike, imagine coming from North Tel Aviv to there, and you came from LA to there, so it's kind of similar.
I came from LA dressed like a Hollywood executive, you know what I mean? So you can imagine. But anyways, it was a great experience, and you're never too old to go to yeshiva. That's the name of the story. Never too old to come and learn.
You are a Hollywood Guido.
You want to hear something funny? So in high school, I went to Calabasas High School, right? And it was a lot of Jewish kids were in the school. A lot of, but not religious. A lot of them from Russian backgrounds and these type of things. Not so religious in that way. More like Reform, conservative, mostly Reform. But I remember in high school, my nickname was the Black Jew. The Jewish kids, they used to say, they used to call me the black. He's like, you're so Jewish, like your whole thing, and it's just like, and I was just like, and I, you just like a funny joke we would have, you know what I mean, type of a thing.
Yeah.
But that was literally my nickname in high school, was the Black Jew.
It's a state of consciousness, because, like, we learn in Torah that ultimately, even converts, it's learned after the fact, but they were always Jewish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know how much time you gentlemen have, but I always wanted to get into the issue of explaining what is a Jewish soul. What is it? Because people, the moment they hear that, they get so mad, they get so angry, they immediately look at it as some kind of elitist thing, or some kind of exclusivity which is not available to, and it's something, this is a lot of Jew haters, they use this as, oh, they see us as nobody ever really goes to the trouble to explain what that is. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, but
we could.
I
just want to let you know, Frank. Yeah, Frank,
I got to go on a date soon, so I don't. But I just
in like 40 minutes, I gotta. Yeah.
I want to say, just if it's okay, just to quickly summarize it, if I can. Whenever you hear the word Jew, when people speak English, or even on Torah topics, you hear the word Jew, that's English. When you study the Hebrew books, when you study Torah books, you'll rarely see the Hebrew cognate for the word Jew, which is Yahud. You'll find the word Yisrael, Israelite, Israel. Okay, so it is a type of consciousness which is available to all of humanity. A soul is consciousness. That's what it is. That's what it is. And consciousness has levels to it. Okay, consciousness can grow. Consciousness can mature. There's levels to it. You don't just stay the same. That's the actual very definition of what it means to be a human being. You have a human soul, a human consciousness, is that it has the potential for growth. And what does growth mean? Well, to get more and more closer to the Creator and the Creator's intent for the creation. So basically, the more you're interested in the Creator and the intent for which He created the world, the more Jewish you become. That's what it means. So people who want to pursue that, who want to get closer and closer to understanding the Creator and serving Him, and and getting the job done as to what He wants to see from the world, that's what Israelite consciousness is. Okay, some people are born into it, and they have a proximity to it. So let's say people who are born Jews, right? For all of history, most people who were Jews were part of a religious Jewish community, okay, in the traditional sense. Doesn't mean that they were all observant, but they were all part of a community, and they were always in proximity to the Torah and Torah scholarship. They had it available. Okay, it's only in the very last generation, which is what we're in right now, that you could say most Jews don't have that access anymore. Most Jews are almost, like, I'm not going to say cut off, but they're not aware that there is such a thing, right? But this is only in the last generation. It's an isolated phenomenon. But most of Jewish history, people who were born into Jewish families, they had access to this consciousness, where if they were inspired and they had a sense of curiosity, well, what am I? What is God? What does he want with this creation? What does he want with me? What's my role in it? And then they would begin investigating that fanatically. And this is a good type of fanaticism. It's called truth fanaticism, where you just want to understand what the hell is going on here, and what do I need to do to, in order to make God happy, to improve the situation. So that's what Jewish consciousness is. Okay, there are some people who are born with that drive. Okay, and then there are some people who are inspired later in life, and that goes from non-Jews and people who are born Jewish. Okay, not everybody born Jewish is this consciousness brought to the surface immediately. Sometimes it takes a lifetime of experiences for that to activate. but that's what it means to be Jewish. And if a Jewish soul was something exclusive, like it was some kind of caste system, right? Then there would not be an ability to convert. So it's a level of it's a level of consciousness available to all humanity. Some people step forward and take it, and some people don't. So I don't know. That was my summary of it.
I would just add to that by saying I agree 100%, and I think the Torah gives us a really good example of how that consciousness manifests through the story of Abraham, right? So Abraham grew up basically like in the suburbs, came from a successful family. His dad was one of the chief idol makers. His dad worked for Nimrod, who's one of the big dogs. Like imagine your dad works for Biden, right? So his dad's in that position. He grew up with, God forbid anybody's dad should know such a thing, but we're just saying in terms of status, and he was able to be in that situation. And that's why, it's an interesting point. We're talking about Hollywood and its effects, but when you think about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? So in my opinion, it's one of the most poisonous shows ever created on television, and specifically for the Black community, because it takes two characters, Will Smith and Carlton. Carlton comes from a two-parent household. Parents are introspective. Parents are loving. They work hardworking, made money, provide a good living for them. But the character, Carlton, has no connection to anything cool. He's the biggest nerd. He can't even dance. And, he's just a complete reject. And then you take Will Smith, who comes from the broken home, right? He comes from the broken home, no father, this situation, talks slang, this, blah, 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 blah. But he's the stud. He's the one everybody wants to be like. He's the thing. And so this idea of understanding the plight of the kid who grows up in the suburbs, right? Like the Black kid who grows up in the suburbs, we don't know that story. We just know about the guy, Will Smith. We just know about the guy from the hood who makes it out, right? And that's like the story. But what about the Black kid who grows up with the American dream, who has access to whatever material things he wants, and he's cool, he's this, whatever. And then he gets to a point and he says, wait, this whole story that they've been selling us that we're going to be happy. You know how many friends I had in rehab in high school, right? And they were millionaires. We were like nowhere compared to the kids that I grew up with in terms of like wealth and status. And they were in rehabs. They're getting nose jobs in high school, getting breast implants in high school. This is like, like what, 20 years something ago? You know what I'm saying? So it's just saying that this the emptiness of that reality was something that I grew up in. The emptiness of having all the American promises that we're supposed to be happy if you have this, if you're educated, if you have this, and there's all these different things we're all in a rat race to get. I'm experiencing that, and then my neighbors are experiencing that. You gonna say my neighbors are experiencing that, and then I'm like, dude, there has to be more to life than this. There has to be more to life than just working hard enough to have a bigger house than my dad, right? Or more cars than my neighbor. Or okay, say I'm super ambitious. I want to be richer than P. Diddy. I just said his name for fun. But the point is just saying that was the dilemma that I grew up with. And so that emptiness was something I just carried with me. I didn't think anything of it. Everybody else is empty. And so when we hear about these illicit actions in Hollywood or politics or high corporate America, these Epstein Islands and all this like really dark statistic, pedophilia, all these things, this comes from a place of super, super darkness. That's which is a byproduct of being empty and filling that emptiness with the worst things on planet Earth: drugs, illicit sex, all these different things, right? So for me, I was young enough, right? Just being out of my parents' house for a few years, being creative, going to school part-time, this type of thing. And then I was able to take that lack, and then I got hooked in with the Kabbalah Center. And the whole thing was about connecting to the light, transforming yourself, being a giver, these very self-help type things. But at that stage of my life, that's all I would have understood. You know what I mean? If you would have brought in any things I've learned post being a Jew, I would have been like, whoa, this is too heavy. I needed to see Madonna there. I needed to see Ashton Kutcher there. I needed to see Demi Moore. I needed to see that from where I was at in my life at that time, right? If it was a bunch of holy stages, like I go to a mill and spot we're talking about, and there was a bunch of guys, Mikubalim, sitting at the table, I'd be like, bro, get me out of here. Like, what is this about? Even though that's where the action's at, right? So I would just say, when it comes to the Jewish soul, number one, has a certain merit, right? Because you have to be guided in the right way, right? It's not just enough to be empty. It's also having a certain merit to meet the right teachers at the right time in the right place. So it's a merit, like connected to the soul that's inside you. The second thing is, this soul has a tremendous desire for truth, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when we talk about people who are not involved in the spirituality, truth for them is this dark stuff, like satanic stuff and bestiality and all types of crazy stuff. That's a level of MS for them. Like that's a real thing, right? And so
it's called what you're describing. This I call it, and it's unfortunate, but I call it the Gnostic soul, where by Gnosticism, like I define it as anything that the God of the Hebrew Scripture wants, they are attracted to. They want to fight him as hard as possible. They want to fight the agenda of the God of the that's described in the Hebrew Scripture. The Ten Commandments, basic morality, they have to all be violated, and there's different Gnostic cultish ways of doing it, but that's what unites them all, and they see it as some kind of. They don't see it as darkness. They see it as a way of transcending the limited.
yes.
So limitations of physicality.
And this is a Gnostic soul, and it's a very powerful soul. Unfortunately, it's like a freight train going in the wrong direction. It's very difficult to put the brakes on that and to re-guide it into the light, because and it's a problem that only Mashiach can solve.
You know, Frank.
In the Torah, we have a great example of that. I just want to make this way, because what Frank just said, there's a Torah example of that. So the Torah makes the distinction between Moshe and Bilam, right?
Yeah.
Bilam also had tremendous gifts, a tremendous big soul, could bring energies in, but because he didn't have the Torah, that the way he connected to that ferocious desire of the soul was all through darkness. He would be intimate with animals. He would do anything. He would do the complete, as Frank said, he would do the complete opposite of the Ten Commandments. If the Ten Commandments connects you to the light, or you connects you to this frame of vibration or energy, that means if you did the opposite, it would bring you to another form of energy, right? Yeah. So Bilam was a person who was able to connect to that other side. So in short, the Jewish soul is a soul, one, that it has a merit, that is going to be pushed in the right direction, and two, it has a desire to fulfill these different technologies, right? Like the Ten Commandments, the way of living, has a desire to connect not just to the law, but what's behind the law, right? It's not just enough. So a lot of my friends that grew up Jewish, hey, I'll keep the mitzvah, that's enough. I'm good. I did the commandment of God. But then there's another group of friends of mine that say, hey, you know what? I'm keeping the law because God has commanded it. However, God commanded it so we could have an intro into this greater form of energy, right? This greater form of light that really fulfills me in the next way, right? And so I was that context of that desire for the total connection is the Jewish soul. And this is what Abraham, when he did a Lech Lecha, this is the reason why Isaac was the way he was, and Jacob, and his son, everything, the whole system, Yosef, these people are expressing this high, Rabbi Akiva, right, expressing this soul that has a specific desire to connect to energy, truth, and ultimately God's consciousness.
You know how what we're saying is true. Frank and I always talk about this thing with these people that are going against God directly and God's commandments. We talk about this whole thing of like 15-minute cities. They want to build 15-minute cities, and we always say how that's like something that Cain was involved in the cities. And you notice what do these people say with regards to Israel? They've been saying it for the last 7 months, especially. our people just got massacred, and what are these people just out there without shame, and they can't stop saying it. It's almost like it's almost like astounding that they're saying this. That's all they can think about is like settler violence, settler violence. But what are they really talking about? Who are they really talking about? What are they really concerned about? They're concerned about what? That the Jewish people are back in their land. They're not in, not to say that we don't live in cities, we do, but if you go to Judea and Samaria, this area that they call the West Bank, what is it? It's not cities, it's rural areas where Jews have gone out. They are farming, they are raising, there's like sheep and vineyards, and it's literally the embodiment of the Torah, and these people are living the Torah as close to what our forefathers tried to do, or were doing, they're trying to do as humanly possible. And these fruitcakes, we call them, see this, and they're just like, we can't have that. We can't have a Jew adding a kitchen or a bathroom in this area, and especially in this part of Israel. This is literally against everything we are. And so we don't care if like 1400 you just got massacred and kidnapped. All we're going to talk about is, apart from the Islamophobia thing, which is also absurd, but like settler violence, a couple of kids going to spray graffiti on a wall and an abandoned Arab house, settler violence. But it's deeper than that. It's like Jews coming back to their land, keeping the Torah. If like the more of us do that, the more Jews do that, it's almost like the Wicked Witch of the West. There's something that Dorothy does that's going to make this witch melt. You don't have to pour water on her. In our case, it's instead of pouring water, we go and do that. And
I just want to make one point, because I think we're all going to. Everybody has to go. I think it's. So I just want to make one point.
I don't have to go.
Frank, like I said, you
insisted. Going on a day.
Frank, you insisted on doing this episode.
All right. Please.
In the middle of the afternoon, but anyway.
So because to the point, I'll just say this point. As a person who was not a part of the Jewish nation and is now very much a part of the Jewish nation, and you look at everything that's going on, and you're like, this is crazy, right? Like this is a real thing in terms of what is being projected and shown versus what's actually happening. But I will say it like this. Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Ari, he has this whole concept that Rabbi Arush uses in his book Garden of Peace called the window concept, right? Or the mirror concept. So it's like your wife, she's mirroring you. Your wife is a reflection of you. And so as your wife does these things, you should not be combative. You should be with a place of Rachmanis, right? Which most married men would tell you is almost impossible to do 100% of the time, but sometimes we strive, right? And so the thing is that Israel, in many ways, is a reflection. The other world looks at the greatness of Israel, the light of Israel, and they see that light, but they see it in a frame of a reflection of their sins. You understand? So whatever situation that goes on throughout history, whatever the dynamic is, if it's about imperialism, it's the Jews' fault. If it's about poverty, it's the Jews' fault. If it's about whatever it is, it's the Jews' fault, because they are looking at themselves. When you look at these kids, I'm offended as an African American. I'm a Jew, but I come from African American culture. And I get offended when I see these white kids walking around campus talking about colonizers. And talking about, a quote unquote segregation and apartheid and all these things. It's like, excuse me, my family grew up in Jim Crow, and you're in that university because your family was able to maintain a certain level of wealth and status because of your skin tone. And you have the nerve to take another minority group that many of your ancestors in Europe abused. And now you want to take that and then now flip who you are onto them. This
is the Gnostic parasite mindset, which we don't have to discuss. I hope you come back and speak.
We want to continue this. This is very interesting.
I do want to say one thing, a comment to what Greg was saying about people in Yehuda and Shamron, and I'll do it in 60 seconds. Okay, so don't worry.
On one foot. Yeah.
the very basic, forget about, I want people listening to this. You're a human being. Forget about where you come from. Forget about like your ethnicity. Imagine a situation, just clear the table. You're a human being, and then there's God. There's just you, and then there's God. And he puts you on a planet, this planet. And there has to be a way of relating to God. What is the nature of your relationship on the most fundamental basic level? It is your food. Okay? God is continually making you exist. Part of that process is feeding you. So the farmer, in growing and planting seeds and working on his crop, is having the Israelite farmer is having a direct relationship with God. That is the very basis of a person's relationship to their creator, because God has to provide. Now, that's one big difference between Egypt and Israel. In Egypt, people did not have to appeal to whatever their spiritual deities were necessarily for their food, because there was the Nile. The Nile worked like clockwork, and the water was always available. And they created these like channels where the water would flow from the Nile. They never had an issue. It worked like clockwork, even better than the Japanese subway system. Okay, so they never had to appeal directly to God for their most basic sustenance. Okay, but in Israel, you don't have that. You don't have a big river that you can, you relied on rain. Okay, so a farmer living in Israel has to talk to God every moment. He has to go to God for every little need that he has. And so the basic form of functioning, the basic circumstance that a Jew is supposed to be in, is to be in Israel and to farm and to have that connection with God. And the Gnostics will literally destroy the world, set off every nuclear bomb if they can, to prevent that basic thing from happening. For the Jewish person to farm, to plant seeds in the soil of Israel, and to ask God for the blessing. That's what they're trying to prevent. That's what it boils down to. I know this sounds, to a lot of people, it sounds a little crazy. But if you're hearing this, remember me. Remember, there's some funny-looking, big-nosed Jewish guy who told you what is really guiding world affairs. Is to prevent. And when the Jew does that, that reverberates.
Frank, you know how we know what you're saying is true? Because normal people, even people with certain political stances, after a massacre like this, literally the last thing they would be thinking about or to say that will come out of their mouth is that. The last thing they would say is that, but that's the first thing they say. They explain it like, oh, but because if there's, these guys are extremists like this, but you also guys have these guys, Smotrich and Think-Fear. Not that I'm a fan of these guys, but you have these guys, so everybody's an equal playing field, and they explain this whole convoluted political explanation. But dude, something's gotta be, or it's what you're saying.
Well, I just want to say, because I know we're leaving, but you guys helped me really understand this idea in Torah that just came to me. I never really had clarity until right now. When we talk about the Jewish neshama and the merit of the Jewish neshama, right? This whole idea that God is going to redeem the Jewish neshama even when they don't even know who they are, right? In the end of days, God is going to bring them back. But allow me to understand the dynamic of Moshe and the burning bush. Moshe, right before that, married Zipporah. Right? Zipporah was Jethro's daughter. Jethro was all into Avodah Zarahs and different types of things, whatever. So you could say conceivably, with him marrying Zipporah, with him working for Jethro, that he could have maybe been influenced by Jethro's thinking. And right as that happens, Hashem comes to him in a burning bush and gives him the Torah. Not the physical Torah, but he gave him that connection to Hashem. But it happened in that instance, you know what I mean? Like it happened. He could have conceivably been pulled the other way to the Sitra Achra. You understand? And but he was pulled into the way of Kedusha through this whole God experience. So I just got that right now.
Yeah, amazing.
Awesome.
Well,
And I didn't have a chance to ask you a stupid question. Maybe for next time. What is the connection between the Kardashian family and the Cardassians from Star Trek? We'll get into that another time.
I didn't even know there was Kardashian Star Trek, but I grew up with the Kardashians, so I got stories about them too.
That's why I asked, because he told me that.
Yeah. Ray J, I got stories on Ray J. All these guys, like I got the dirt, I got the tea. If you want me to spill the tea, I could spill the tea on all these guys.
And remember, you could always count on me to spoil profound moments with stupidity. All right.
Well, you learn a lot about that when you're married. You know what
Speaking
I mean?
of
another time.
Speaking of which, man, and Mordechai, I don't know if you're going to be. I mentioned this already a couple of times, or we kind of realized this. Mordechai and I. This is a fun fact. I don't know how fun this is. Mordechai and I have the same moil, and Mordechai just disappeared. We have the same moil.
Folks, for the folks at home, a moel is the person who conducts the ritual circumcision.
Yeah.
In Mordechai,
so in Mordechai's case, because he grew up, I guess his parents were at the time they were Muslim. I don't know if Mordechai can hear me. He was already circumcised medically, and then he just had to do this. It was like a kind of a symbolic procedure. In my case, I had to be turned into an 8-year-old mummy in a certain part of my body. So that was fun.
Thank you, Reverend Farron.
Mordechai got so scared. Mordechai got so scared about that he left. I chased him away.
Are you still with us?
As Frank likes to say, Mordechai has gone bye-bye.
Well, you know what? Oh, man, I wanted to tell Mordechai about the one redeeming thing about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to say, Greg?
I don't know. Oh, Carlton can dance. I resent that people say that he cannot dance.
No. I watched that show for one reason.
He's trying to reconnect.
For one reason and one reason only.
Oh, Hillary? No.
Oh, yes. That's all I'm going to say about that. I was in love with Hillary.
Daddy, can I have $300? Daddy, can I have $500? Daddy, can I have $200?
She must have been extremely conscious of the superficiality and the airheadedness of people like that to play it so well. That means,
of course.
So you kind of understood that she was so funny and so pretty. Yeah. I love that show.
Only an highly intelligent person can play a person like that, a character like that.
She did it great.
All right. Well, Mordechai's having issues. Right when I mentioned the moil thing, I think it was too much. It was too much for him to handle.
Right.
And who was the moil, by the way, Frank? You know, it's Rabbi Okano from Free. Oh, just 1 second. Sir, I'm being summoned to help something around where I'm staying, and
let's. So I want to thank you. I want to thank our guest Mordechai, and our audience. Thank you for watching, and God blesses everyone. And,
yes, folks, and the next time we speak, I'll be back in America. I'm flying out tomorrow. As of now, I'm very sad. I'm very, very, very sad. Whatever. I'll get into that next time. All right, sir. Thank you, Mordechai, if you can hear us, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Peace.